carry me away, lift me from this place, ease my burdens, Lord. Take me to your world, let me see your face, carry me away. When I close my eyes, I can see your face, and an ocean of love washes over me, and I am in your presence. Carry me away, lift me from this place, ease my burdens, Lord. Take me to your world, let me see your face, carry me away. When I hear your voice, the power of your word, emotions of peace flood right through my heart. I live for you, and I embrace your holiness. Carry me away, lift me from this place, ease my burdens, Lord. Take me to your world, let me see your face, carry me away. Carry me away, lift me from this place, ease my burdens, take me to your world, let me see your face, carry me away. Carry me away, lift me from this place, ease my burdens, Lord. Take me to your world, let me see your face, carry me away. Carry me away, lift me from this place, ease my burdens, Lord. Take me to your world, let me see your face, carry me away.
Hello and welcome to another SDA Q&A, Season 5, Episode 3. My very special guest is Kenton Johansen. How are you, Kenton?
Great, Peter. How are you?
I'm really good. Great to have you on the program. This is number 2 of a little series within our series of SDA Q&A, where we're looking at that 70s SDA gospel revival or awakening that really exploded in the Adventist Church in the 70s. We listened to Cal Stewart a couple of weeks ago. It was fascinating. You guys had a reunion about a month ago, which you attended.
Yeah.
And your father was kind of smack bang center in the middle of this revival. Can you tell, before we kind of kick off, and welcome everybody, by the way, sorry we're a bit late, a few technical issues as usual, and we're kind of doing something very unique today, really stretching my capabilities. We're going to be looking at lots of pictures and movies and whatnot to really bring alive this time period, which I think was a very important time within Adventism. But Kenton, before we kind of look at our spreadsheet of where we're going today, just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you fit into the picture of this Adventist 70s gospel awakening.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm wearing on the colour today, because it was a very colourful time. You can remember all the bright colours and the bright carpets, the bright curtains and the bright kitchens.
The bright flared pants.
Yeah, I didn't understand the significance of it until probably after I was working in the big world. I didn't understand when I went to East Paran that I was on a fringe, that wasn't the typical Adventist church where people walked in with bare feet and jeans and long hair and jewellery. Flash cars. That wasn't the typical Adventist church, but that was my birthplace.
Yeah.
So, and looking back now, I can see why I sort of found it difficult to fit into the bigger scheme of things.
Well, how old would you have been, say, in mid-70s?
Oh, well, I was born in 71. So everything that you hear from me today is from research I've done.
Yeah.
I've got memories of the people we're talking about at East Paran, but I didn't witness live, per se, the glowworms. I have vague recollection of them. I think they sang for the 75 Youth Congress at Monash University.
Yeah.
Mum and Dad did the music there as well. So I have memories of them practicing in the lounge room, but most of the information I've gleaned today are from the years I've done.
And I think it's important because you're still young and fresh enough to be able to have the energy to pull together all this stuff and to make it a really valuable resource for people. Just a quick few hellos from people that you may know. They have come up on the screen, but when I put them on the screen, it doesn't say who the name is. So I'm just looking at my monitor at the side here. Marion McLeod says, "Hi, Kenton. Looking forward to hearing what you have to say." Carol Platt says, "Hello, Kenton." David Wilmoth is watching. Joy Marie Butler says, I'll put this one up. Joy Marie Butler says, "I remember you as a baby, Kenton."
I wore a dress. I was my sister's little sister. So, yeah, we were unorthodox.
I like it. And your shirt is as hippie as my background.
Yeah, I had hippie bells as well. That was one of the first things I got from an auntie.
Yeah.
So they were the times.
They were the times, yeah. And I think fueled by the population as well. The baby boomers were coming of age. And I know in the Adventist Church there have been other kind of gospel revivals, but because every following generation was smaller, they haven't had the same kind of impact.
No. I mean, there's time with the Whitlam era as well. Like, it's very, very buoyant in Australia when you reflect on what happened.
Now, let's go to our sheet that you sent me, a kind of running sheet, because we want to kind of be as organized as possible. I'll let you steer the conversation working through the sheet. Tell me any number of pictures, the number of the photo to bring up on the screen, and I'm going to kind of let you steer the program today. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing a lot of these photos for the first time as well.
Okay, so to understand Dad, and that's who we're talking about a little bit today, and Mum as well, but Dad was like the one that lit the fire. you have to go back to his family, and his family today goes back to the 1840s.
Now,
So
just before you go, by your dad, you're talking about Jim Johansen,
Jim Johansen, yeah.
and he kind of was a little bit of the. How would you describe his role in all of this?
Well, he started it. Like, that's not my opinion. That's the opinion of the people that I've researched.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this kind of 70s gospel revival had sprung from out of California in the general Christian body and exploded all around the world with music and culture and whatnot. And so by the time it hit Adventism in Australia, your dad was there ready to kind of catch this this kind of revival spirit, and he really was responsible for infusing it into his church.
Yeah, it's built out from the evangelical world. People like Ralph Carmichael and all those artists that worked with evangelicals in the US.
Yeah, Andre Crouch and
Yeah,
that's incredible. And then we had our very own, Bob Wolfgram and Lowell Tarling with incredible albums that they put out during this time. Music often fuels these kind of movements and revivals, doesn't it?
very much. It was a
Yeah.
big musical thing.
Yeah. Okay, so Jim Johansen, we're going back to the history now. Back to what year did you say?
1840s.
Awesome. Wow. Okay.
So to understand Dad, you need to understand both of his grandparents, just grandparents were ship's carpenters. So Robert Hare worked with his brother Metcalf around the Bay of Islands, and Johan Johansen was a ship's carpenter, working on the boats between Denmark and England carrying coal, and that's where he found his wife Faith in London. But back to the 1840s, when the Americans, first of all, I just set the context of this. The Americans arrived in Australia and New Zealand about 1885, and the first Adventists in New Zealand were Dad's great uncle Edward and Auntie Elizabeth. Then they were baptized by Stephen Haskell in Auckland. And I just spoke about Uncle Metcalf. He when he found out about Adventism, he spearheaded the building program at the Currumbong estate. He built the sawmill, which he used to supply all the timbers to build the college buildings. He built the barge that used to run up and down Dora Creek, carrying granos and Marmite and granola. And they used to use the sawmill that he built to supply all the timber. Also, that was the first factory for SHF in Currumbong, and it was Sabbath school rooms on a Sabbath on the weekend. So they were very hands-on people. All those people I spoke about, Metcalf, Edward, Robert, they all spoke fluent Maori as well. So they were very connected to the local Indigenous culture, the Maori culture, and the Maoris respected them. And the Maoris looked up to Joseph Hare, which is Daddy Hare, the one that came out from Ireland, as a spiritual guide. So they weren't the typical people just pushing the Maoris out the way. They connected and engaged with the Maoris. If that makes sense?
Yeah.
Any questions?
No, I'm just fascinated. Should I bring up a picture of that Henrietta and Robert?
Bring up Henrietta and Robert.
Yeah,
each of their stories is interesting, as you can imagine.
And we'll just check.
Just as you do that, I'll keep on going.
Yeah, and just make sure you tell me as we go when to bring up a picture.
Yeah. Okay.
Can everyone see that one there?
So that's Henrietta and Robert. Henrietta and Robert, their story is interesting in itself. Robert Hare was the first person from the South Pacific Division to be ordained. He wasn't ordained in Australia. He's actually ordained in the US at Hillsburg College, where he did his qualification to become a minister. And there he met a beautiful young staff member, Henrietta Johnson. She was one of his, lecturers at the time. And he fell in love with his lecturer, Henrietta, and she sold all her jewellery to fund the work back here in Oz. So that's interesting. She has ancestors going right back to, she had a great-great-grandfather who was the first governor of Maryland. And on her mother's side, George Taylor was a signatory to the Declaration of Independence. There's a bit of Yankee history in the background there. So I imagine these people like Johansen probably sounded Danish. I can imagine Henrietta Johnson sounding American, and Dad had an American accent twang when he came back from the GC in the 50s.
Wow.
So yeah, they were more of a global family. They like Eric, my grandfather, was Mr. Weet-Bix. He introduced Weet-Bix to China and India. So yeah, they had a very global life. They weren't just based here in Oz or at Kurrumbong or Wahroonga. So going to spin off from Joseph Hare, interestingly had a sister called Judith. Judith was a little older and she left home a little bit earlier. And when she left, she arrived in Melbourne in the early 1840s. And you got to remember they were very early days for Melbourne, because Melbourne was only founded in 1835. So this is very early days. And when she rocked up in Melbourne, she met a guy called Samuel Furphy. And this is a very funny story, I think, because it's no Furphy. She and Samuel settled in Shepparton, and she wrote back to her brother Joseph, and she said, "Come out here, folks. It's God's own country. The land was cheap, and there was no religious persecution." So the Hares were part of the tension in Ireland between the Protestants and the Catholics. The Hares had originally actually moved from Scotland. Hare is a Scottish name, not an Irish name. And they were finding things a bit hot around Ireland with religious bigotry. And so that's one reason why they moved, apart from like a potato famine. And so Joseph and his wife, every time they thought about coming, they would Maggie, his wife, Joseph's wife, would fall pregnant. So it delayed their trip to Down Under by 15 years.
Wow.
And this is a really interesting bit. So when on the way out, the story goes, and some people question the story, but the story goes, and on the way out, they were aiming for Australia, but they heard that New Zealand had better incentives from the government. So they chose to actually to get off in Auckland. And when they got off at Auckland, Joseph went down to the Lands Office and he says, "Can I have a piece of turf?" And the guy behind the desk says, "Oh, sure, just south, like 40k south east of Auckland here. We have a nice patch of grass, just been taken off the Maoris, actually." And Joseph at that point, and this is 1863, said, "No way, I'm not taking anything from the Maoris." And I just find that mind-blowing, because some Australians are still getting their head around, treaty and all that sort of stuff 160 years later. But Joseph was 160 years ahead of his time.
Ahead of his time, wow.
And so he was offered, I'm imagining, a piece of turf up around the Bay of Islands where there had been a treaty at Russell, and given this land in Kyo, which is where the Hares settled. And I think Kyo was the second oldest church next to the Ponsonby Church in Auckland, in New Zealand. So that's where the Hares got off. And they, first of all, they harvested the carry tree, and also then made friends with the Maoris up there and built boats.
Wow. Is that, can I bring up that picture number 2 of Robert Hare?
Yeah.
It's a beautiful part of the world there too, isn't it?
I've been there, actually. I was watching you juggle all the things as you produced today's show, and I'm thinking you're a bit like a radio DJ back in the old days.
Yeah.
At a radio station.
Yeah.
And I actually went up to Kyo when I was 16, because I went to Auckland to help out the Adventist Media Centre as a work experience, produce some Focus on Living show.
Right.
So I was only 16 when I started looking into this stuff, and it's over 35 years ago. So yeah, this is Robert. So Robert's an interesting character. He probably, I'm guessing, established more Adventist churches than any other person in history. He established churches in every state of Australia, and both North and South New Zealand. He visited places like Pitcairn and Norfolk Island. He was a real goer. He was a close contact of Ellen White.
Wow.
Ellen White didn't always say nice things to him.
Right.
one of the letters she wrote is about 12 pages, single space type, and I couldn't read it for 30 years.
Wow.
I have to say it was toxic.
Really?
Yeah,
Have you still got a copy of that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Oh,
the church founded after my uncle Reuben died in about 76. My family founded in 76, and they were actually quite ashamed of it, I suppose, at the start of it.
Wow. Because he was being told off by Ellen.
For 10 pages, yeah.
Wow.
And his wife, Henrietta.
Is that something you'd be able to make available for people to read?
I don't know if the family would feel comfortable about it, but I could ask.
So what year was that?
That was when Ellen White arrived in 1891, 1892.
Wow. And where was he living at the time when he would have received that?
He was living in the South Island of New Zealand, setting up churches.
Right.
Yeah.
And she was over here in Australia.
That time, Ellen hadn't even met him.
Wow.
So I don't know, as I can ascertain. So I don't know how she understood him so well. But anyway.
Incredible bit of history right there. Have a ponder and ask some of the family, because that's an incredible part of
there is more than that.
There.
It's obviously more than that. And there's also a big file on the hairs at the Alan G. White Research Centre.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there'll probably be more letters there as well.
Yeah.
So I'm getting back to Joseph. Joseph was also a bit of a poet, and he was a preacher, and he had a way with words, and he was internationally recognised as a poet. But going back to the Murphys, back in Shepparton, Samuel and Judith had two boys, John and Joseph. Joseph would have taken his name after his uncle Joseph Hare, and this guy's Joseph Furphy. John was the inventor of the Furphy water cart, made famous during World War I, because the guys that lugged the water around Palestine and Gallipoli, and these were heavy carts. It would have been the actual tank would have weighed a ton on a horse, like in the car. They would share stories from one trip to the next trip, and as they went around, the stories got longer and longer and longer, and that's where the idea of Furphy comes from. And it's sort of like morphed these days into Furphy beer. Have you seen that?
Yes. And that's a direct connection to his name.
Exactly.
Yeah, wow.
And the other son, Joseph Furphy, took his name, like I said, after Joseph Hare, and he became a writer and a poet like his cousin Robert. These are direct cousins.
Have you got some of the copies of the poetry that these guys wrote?
Oh no, but I do. I've seen it on Wikipedia, and I probably should get the book. But Joseph Furphy was the first novelist of Australia. He was the father of Australian novels.
Wow.
He wrote a novel and under the pseudonym Tom Collins, and his first recognised novel was Such Life. So he's taken the words from Ned Kelly's last words, and it wasn't recognised for about 30 years. It's set, as I understand, in the context of the early, like 1901, 1902, 1905. And he's talking about bush characters that he meets. And it wasn't recognised for another 30 or 40 years. But when it was recognised as the first Australian novel. So these guys, they weren't just people that baptised people and preached to people. These were real people that had interesting stories.
Yeah, engaging with the real world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the Furphy connection. I reckon Dad would have got a hoot out of that. I only just discovered that, but I was reading.
So your dad, Jim, wouldn't have even known about that.
I don't know. I made this connection because I was reading Eric B. Hare's story on Irish Boy and God, which is about Robert Hare.
Yeah.
It was written about 65 when he was GC director of the Sabbath School department. And I read this bit about Judith. I thought, that sounds too close to home, the Furphy.
Yeah.
But then I Wikipedia'd them, and all this came out, and it all connected. I'm not the only person who made those connections. Another lady who wasn't an Adventist, but a great granddaughter, daughter like myself of Joseph Hare, she makes the connection here in her book as well.
Wow.
So, a little bit of interesting stuff. So those are
incredible
characters you had there in your photos.
Now, are there other photos? We're not up to number 3 yet, are we, on that?
Oh, wait a minute, I'll pull it up.
This is
See what
now
we're up to.
jumping to 1948, though.
Yeah, well, okay, so I've just given a bit of
Yeah.
background on Dad's maternal side. On his paternal side, there was Faith, number 3, and Johann, number 4, here. And as I've already said, Johann was on the coal boats between Denmark and England. Faith,
There's
they had 6 kids between the 3 of them. I mean, 2 of them, sorry. They had 6 kids, and a big family. And Faith, in number 3, 1948, she's remembered as being the highest selling coal porter nationwide year on year. So I don't know how she did it, but she'd leave her 6 kids in Sydney, take a boat to Perth, and sell books for a couple of months and then come back. Pretty strong woman. The Johansens are probably seen from the church as being a very patriarchal family.
Right.
But from the inside, they're actually a matriarchal family.
Right.
All the women in the Hare family and the Johansen family are extremely strong.
Yeah.
They're leaders in their own right, and they make their own mark in their own right.
Yeah, I love it. And Faith was married to Johann, did you say?
Johann, yeah. Johann was a pure Dane.
That's this guy I think I'm about to bring
And that's
up.
number 4. Johann came across, I think, great controversy when he first arrived in Launceston. We're talking about 1890, I think.
Right.
And he'd already decided to keep Sabbath as a 7th day. But then he thought, oh, there's another group of people doing that. So that's how he linked up with the Adventists.
Oh, right.
Johann's remembered as being a manager of the signs. My grandfather, Eric, I used to talk to him when I was at college with you, Peter.
Yeah.
He could recollect travelling from North Fitzroy, where the church was founded in Australia, up to Warburton, walking beside the horse and cart all the way up the Yarra Valley to Warburton. And then we're talking 1905, 1906.
Mind-blowing.
Johann was also a principal at Avondale College. And another thing that's not widely unheard, he also set up the Australian Conference Association, which is the business side of the church, with his oldest, Walter Johansen.
Wow.
So they set up the business side, like the corporate side of the church. It wasn't just about, converting people or ministering to people. It was also about, balancing the books.
Yeah, the practical side of running everything as well. Yeah.
And then I threw in a few photos from Mum's side of the family, because she goes back just as far.
Yeah.
So on number 5, she is her grandmother and great-grandmother, so Mary and Susie Gurner. They were charter members of the Adelaide Church. They would have been, I think they were baptised by Corliss. I think Corliss was the first person to start off the Adelaide Church. And Susie went on to be, she studied at the St Kilda Road Bible School.
That's Susie standing there, is it? And Mary sitting, yeah. Incredible outfit too. Look at
this is the turn of the century stuff.
Yeah, amazing.
Susie studied at the St Kilda Road Bible School just like Johann did. Susie also was a secretary for Ellen White for the last 9 months before she went back to Elmshaven in the US.
Wow.
She also went on to become the first secretary treasurer of the West Australian Conference. She started up Sanitarium in Western Australia. And she also, while her husband was at war, if you look at number 6, you can see her husband, Sydney, in his uniform, where he served in Palestine. She also ran a picture theatre. This is mind-blowing. She ran a factory for meat sausages. She ran a margarine factory.
Yeah.
And by the time she was my age, she had 25 properties to her name.
Mind-blowing.
So she was a real entrepreneur. She was the first woman to have a driver's license and the first woman to own a Model T in Western Australia. So this is what I mean by strong.
I love it. Yeah, I love it.
Really strong.
Yeah.
I mean, Johann was not only the manager of the signs and all that other stuff I talked about, he also delivered Faith's orders. So Faith used to win the client over, and Johann had to deliver the orders. So I don't know how he did it a lot, but he's remembered as being a very gentle man.
Yeah, that's the guy in the picture we just saw.
Yeah, number 4.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh, this is Johansen. Sorry, the previous one. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
But all interestingly, Sydney
But he was a mover and a
shake
shaker. He was a mover and a shaker too, though.
Yeah, like Sydney is another interesting bit of gossip. Sydney and Susie divorced in the 1930s. Susie divorced him.
Far out.
And I'm guessing the reason she divorced him, maybe he was traumatized from service, like in war. I've read his letters about what it was like to serve in Jerusalem during World War I and with bombs and shells going off. I can imagine him coming back shell shocked, but he also went on to become an ambulance officer after they were divorced.
Excuse me.
So, yeah.
Is that this guy?
Now, that's Sydney Gerner, who married Susie.
Is that this one?
Sydney Gardner, who married Susie Gerner.
That's the one in the picture now?
That was number 6. I'm not looking at your pictures, I'm looking at my own.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Can you see on the screen? Is
I'll
that
have
the,
a look. I'll
is that
go
the
back.
guy she? Is
Yeah,
that's the guy she
Sydney.
divorced.
He was a sergeant major quartermaster.
Right, and he may have been traumatized.
Probably. I mean, that's how it makes sense of it.
It makes sense, doesn't it? It does.
Yeah. Like, why would somebody do that? You know?
Yeah. Yeah. He probably, was bringing a lot of that stuff, not intentionally, but into the family, perhaps. And so that'd be interesting having read his letters.
Yeah, we're all human, you know.
Mm.
And we all bleed if you prick or cut us, you know. We all have pain.
Yeah.
So these are real people that I've discovered, and some of their stories are funny.
Yeah.
But I don't know how many funny stories will come past today.
Oh, just go for it. I love the what's the word for it? The energy of them. Like, no matter what, they're real people. But I keep coming back to this word, movers and shakers. They make things happen.
In a word, they were passionate,
entrepreneurial as well.
Totally invested and passionate about what they believed in, and nothing stopped them.
Yeah.
As I can remember or see, you know, like I'm living with their legacy. So
yeah, current generations seem quite soft by comparison.
Oh, you look at Susie's wedding gown, and you look at my grandmother's older sister in the 1920s wedding gown. They went from like cutting off at the ankles to like above the knees, you know. So yeah, they push the boundaries.
Incredible.
So you want me to talk on more of those photos?
Yeah, so we go up to number 7 now. Yeah,
so you can see Nettie Hare there, number 7. She married my grandfather Eric Hare,
and Eric
Johansen. So
Eric
there's Nettie Hare. There were 2, and Eric Johansen, my grandfather.
Yeah.
In the Johansen family, the eldest was Mabel, and then there was Walter. Walter built the first science publishing house in Warburton. Up until Walter built the publishing house in Warburton, it was like in a tent, and then it graduated to a little shed. I've seen the actual photos. And Walter's publishing house was ruined by a flood in the early 1930s. And that's when they went to build the yellow brick publishing house you see now. It's a little higher off the Yarra River there. But the other thing that saved them was they built at that time in the 50s the Upper Yarra Reservoir, and then it saved the Warburton Valley from flooding again. So I'm just talking about the Johansen family.
Yeah, and I've just put number 8 up the picture there.
And so Ruth, as you can see there in number 8, she had an older sister Ruth. She became Ruth Lane. There's Nettie Hare, and then there's Enid Wilkinson. She became Enid Wilkinson. They're all beautiful people. Nettie Hare, she went on to start the very first school at Glen Huon in Tasmania, south of Hobart. And I've been there to the church, and I can imagine when she was there, and we're talking 1916, there wouldn't have been a road between between Hobart and Glen Huon. They would have had to take in a boat. It was very rough country.
Yeah.
And then she married my grandfather in Shanghai in China in 1918 from memory.
Nettie did.
Yeah, and she also had an LMAS A, so in violin. So she graduated from Newcastle Conservatorium with her LMAS A, and she went on to also teach violin to lots of people in China where my grandparents served. And my grandparents served in the Far Eastern Division, both China and Singapore, for 15 years of their married life. So nearly a very long stint.
Now, so Nettie married Eric.
Yep. Eric
I remember when
Johansen.
I was in primary school here in Coorambong at Avondale, the school was divided into houses, and one of them was called Hare, I think.
Oh, there you go.
And we often heard the name Eric Hare.
Yeah. Well, Eric Hare was Nettie's older brother. She had two older brothers, Eric and Reuben. Eric in his time was, like I said before, steered the Sabbath school department at the GC for 15 years. But before that, he'd served in Burma twice, and he was known as Dr. Rabbit.
Yeah.
And that connected with the Karen people, because in Karen folklore and myth, a rabbit was like top notch, top dog.
Right.
Almost God.
Right. Wow.
So he had rapport with the Karen people straight away.
Because
And the Karen people still remember him fondly even to this day.
Wow.
So that's another connection that you talked about with
Eric. Yeah. So just as a quick aside, so Nettie that we saw in the picture just there with the four women.
Yeah.
Who would some of her descendants be that are around today?
Well,
Connected to you, like.
Well, there's a whole string of this.
Because
Nettie looked all the kids and grandchildren from Eric and Nettie. So there's first of all, in that family, there was Uncle Eric and Uncle Eric in Lorna, and they were married during World War II. They had Christine, Nettie, Donna, and that were the children of Uncle Eric's, and then children of Uncle Lynn and Auntie Joan was Elizabeth and Colin. Then you might remember Auntie Bobby and all her children. So there was, just thinking here on the spot, John, Darlene, Robert, Sherilyn, and then there was my dad James and my mother Moretta, and then you would, around college, you would know Auntie Beth and her children.
Yeah.
And Auntie Beth had 4 girls: Michelle, Tony, Renee, and Karina.
Sherilyn and I were at school together, and as I mentioned to you earlier, and Robert and I were friends as well, musician.
Yeah. It's a small world.
Yeah. Because there's a relative of yours. I was at a cafe in Toronto recently, and she walked in, and I knew she was a relative of yours, but she looks so much like Nettie, so she's come down that line somehow.
Yeah,
I've just got a mental blank of her name. She'd be in her 30s.
No, she's probably one of Beth's kids.
Yeah, and I just seeing the picture of Nettie there, I can see the family resemblance, very similar looking.
It might even be one of Auntie Bobby's grandchildren.
Yeah, I think it's through Bobby. Yeah. I'll talk to Sherilyn next. I saw her the other day at a cafe as well.
Awesome. Hi, Sherilyn.
Yeah, she might be watching. So sorry, back to the story.
Yeah, so I'm just connecting the story with these photos.
Yeah. It's amazing. Now, I'll just quickly bring up, someone's just made a couple of comments. I like to bring up comments as they come through. This is Terry Atkins has written, nice to hear you, Kenton. Memories of you and Paul and at Kilsyth Sanitarium and Wanturna Church, Melbourne, and Mother Marietta at North Fitzroy Church.
Yeah, I remember Terry. Terry's a very, very great guy. I remember him being a rep at Windsor and Kilsyth.
That's right. And by the way, everyone, if you're writing a message and you're on Facebook as you write, do you mind just putting your name in the comment that you're writing? And that way it'll come up on the screen. Otherwise, it just says Facebook user, and I have to kind of work out who has said what and whatnot. This is Joy Marie Butler again, and she's written, Eric Hare was a powerful influence in many baby boomers' lives. Fantastic storyteller, and I shall never forget his visit to my church where I decided to try to tell stories like he did. That's great, Joy.
I mean, in his time, Eric was like Uncle Arthur, and
Yes.
he wrote his books. So Eric wrote a lot of storybooks. He also had records made of him.
That's right. I remember hearing
the old real tape as well.
Yeah.
So he was as big as Uncle Arthur back in the 50s.
Now, this is from Kay Judge. Good to hear from you, Kay. Great to hear stories of people shared with respect and honouring of their experiences and beliefs. Each one adds to the rich tapestry of the Adventist journey and extended faith family. Certainly their passion is something to acknowledge. That's very true. Well said, Kay. And yes, so it is a rich tapestry. It's incredible. And part of the reason I'm, wanting to do this little series within the SDA&A series is to highlight these gems of passion and gospel-oriented kind of focus that a lot of that can be found within the Adventist history and legacy. Someone's just written. This is Joy again. Eric B. Hare stories are still available. My grandchildren love them. There we go. Where are they available?
At the ABC.
At the ABC, really?
You get his books at ABC, and he has CDs as well. So he used to have all those records. You can buy them on CD and listen to the stories as well.
So you're getting the royalties from that, are you, Kenton?
No. They belong to Chapel Records, I think.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, let's keep going.
I can't help myself. I'm going to say this. Going back to some of those photos. The next one there is a photo. I'll just say, first of all, on the maternal side is Les and Lola Engelbrett.
Yeah.
Les started up the sanitarium factory in Hobart during World War II, and Lola came back through the Susie and Mary line I talked about before. Then going on to number 10, there's Peter, Eric, and Lenny. That's an interesting story because, as I understand, you talked about Eric here, but Eric had two sons, Lenny and Peter. And I think Peter was asked by the GC to prove that the creation story scientifically, but he actually came up with contrary evidence. He did his PhD on it.
Really?
I find that stuff.
What year was that?
I imagine it's probably in the 50s and the 60s.
Wow. I wonder if that's
was it the Biblical Research Centre? Was that the name? Yeah.
So he was hired to prove the creation story, came up with contrary evidence, and did he remain in the church afterwards?
I think he did, yeah. I don't know. Like, I wasn't living in America, and there's quite a few of the Hares that went on to be doctors and professors of mathematics at different Adventist universities through America. But that's just one little interesting story that Dad shared with me, because that one's not shouted from the mountaintops.
No.
and this is the interesting thing about Adventism is Adventism teaches graduates to think, and to use their brain, but doesn't always handle so well what they do when they do think.
That's right. Yeah.
So this has been with Adventism from the beginning. I think Adventism's always had a thirst for truth, present truth. Yeah. Anyway, it's a little story.
Well, I remember listening to a Mormon podcast at one time, and they were being confronted. These two apologists for Mormonism were being confronted by someone, and that person was revealing some of these, hidden secret stories where people had used their brains, discovered some things that weren't in alignment so much with the Mormon beliefs. And I loved their answer. There was, so what? We've got a history, and some of it's flawed, some of it's good, some of it's bad, and here it is on the table. I really kind of respected that. I would have no problem. I wish Adventism embraced that kind of, here we are, warts and all.
Well, I do too. And I think this sets up a nice context background for where Dad came into the scene.
Yeah.
Because early Adventists, and this is my DNA, what I identify with, they were natural thinkers. They were creatives.
Mm.
And we've already spoken about how much they already set up, within a generation. And that needs to be harnessed. That needs to be
Exactly.
that needs to be used and promoted as much as possible, because it's those that think outside the square that can find the solutions to the current problems that we face.
Yeah. When Fred Veltman was commissioned by the GC to research Ellen White's borrowing, particularly with Desire of Ages, because the findings weren't what the GC had hoped for, the 8-year study was just kind of hidden away. And I just think that's sad. I think I would be able to cope with going, oh, well, that's life. That's real. Let's embrace the good and the bad and look at the big picture. Look at the big picture.
Yeah, of course.
And we're going to come soon too and actually watch some of the sunrise. What was it called?
Let the sun shine.
Let the Sun Shine movie, which in many ways was purposely hidden for decades because it seemed a little bit too perhaps worldly or too much outside the box thinking was going on. And
it wasn't owned by the mainstream.
Yeah, so we're gonna share some of that soon, guys. A couple of quick things on the side. Kay Judge, and thanks, Kay, for putting your name in the text of your comment on Facebook, because I don't have to go finding it. I still have some Eric Hare stories on 45 records. That's great, on the old 45s. And I brought this up earlier when we were talking about this kind of idea. Thanks, Logan Smith. Good to hear from you.
Hey, Logan.
Yeah,
haven't heard that name for a while.
Yeah, I know. Good to see you here, Logan. And yeah, sadly, that is true. We're talking about the way we Adventists have got this great, vibrant heritage of warts and all, good and bad, ups and downs. I think just put it all out there on the table and embrace it. Now, this is an interesting one. I took care of Eric Hare at Berrien General Hospital. He was a sweet man. Who wrote that?
That's
That's Margaret Walden Calkins Deeden. Thank you, Margaret. That's interesting.
That's very interesting.
And here's a good one. This is Darren Pratt. Remembering you as a classmate, Kenton.
G'day, Pratty.
That's awesome. Okay, so where are we?
We'll go on our spreadsheet.
We just looked at Les and Lola. Did you want to say something about them?
I've just got to. Well, I did say that Les started the Wheat Bix
Factory
in Hobart.
Yeah, you did. That's right.
There's a couple of photos there of Mum and Dad growing up.
I'll bring in number 10, Peter, Eric, and Lenny. We haven't looked at that one.
Yeah, I talked about that a bit.
You talked about that, but I'll just quickly show it so people can see what we were talking about there.
Dad did say that there was a tension between Eric and his sons, Peter and Lenny. Both went on to do PhDs.
Interesting.
Just that tension between Eric's beliefs and what Peter and Lenny discovered in their study.
Yes, yeah.
So that there was a generational divide even back then.
Yeah. So this picture, this is Eric in the middle, Peter on the left, Lenny on the right. What year would this have been?
I imagine it's in the 50s there.
Right.
Maybe, yeah, because they're a little bit older than my dad, I'm guessing.
Yeah. This is a silly question. Everyone probably knows, but Peter and Lenny alive?
I don't think so.
No.
I had seen photos of them from the 90s.
Yeah.
I think just like my parents, they've fallen by the way.
Yeah, okay.
Away since. Yeah.
Let's bring up that next photo. Thanks for your patience, those that are watching. I'm getting used to modern technology here. This is now coming into this era, shall we say, of the 70s, nearly, is it?
This is World War II.
Oh, sorry. No, this is, I looked at the wrong thing there. This is Moretta and Judy.
Yeah, Judy was a very good organist. She's alive. My mother was a very good pianist, as you'll hear in some of the recordings. This is them on the back of a granage truck in Hobart during World War
Wow.
II.
And this is your mum in the middle there.
Mum's on the right, Judy's on the left, and they've got a friend I haven't identified in the middle.
Okay, so say that again. Your mum's on the right,
Judy's on the left,
and this unidentified friend in the middle.
Yeah.
Right. Your mum's the one really smiling there.
She used to walk herself to school when she was 5.
Wow.
Hobart.
Incredible. And this is in Hobart, isn't it?
Yeah.
Look at that fantastic artwork on the back of the truck there too.
On the granage truck during World War II, Uncle Reuben, who's is Robert's oldest son, he had all the granage trucks set up as ambulances in Sydney should Japan invade Sydney. So he was one step ahead.
Wow.
Interesting guy. He was the sort of guy that had 1 foot in the church and 1 foot out of the church.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody knows or remembers Uncle Reuben.
So Reuben, how was Reuben connected?
Reuben was Nettie's eldest brother, my grandmother's oldest brother.
Right. Wow.
He was, when I went to New Zealand in 86,
Yeah.
I went to a birthday party of a brother and sister.
Yeah.
And the brother, he was about 86. He was a Weber. He said to me, I remember your Uncle Reuben. I said, oh, what do you remember about him? Well, he said, back in the 1920s, I was playing for the All Blacks. He was an Adventist playing for the All Blacks. And he said, I got into a bit of trouble because I fell in love with this beautiful young lady, but no one would marry us. No Adventist would marry him because he'd fallen with a lady that was outside of the church, and he played for the All Blacks on Sabbath. So he rocks up to the conference office. He goes up to Uncle Reuben's office, and Reuben happened to be the president of the Northern New Zealand Conference. And he says, Uncle Reuben, no one will marry me. Can you help? He says, I'll marry you.
Really? I love it.
There's lots of stories like that about Uncle Reuben.
Interesting. So you're saying he was the one that had kind of 1 foot in the church, 1 foot out of the church, but he was the conference president at some time.
He'd been a union president as well.
Yes,
He'd been an editor of the Record and the Signs. When he used to go to Warburton, he'd visit the Warburton, factory and everything. He never stayed at the healthcare centre. He'd always stay at the hotel. Do you know why he stayed at the hotel? He needed his slice of meat. And I have no idea where he got his taste for meat from, because as I remember, everybody else was like, true and died vegetarians.
Oh, yes. Wow. Now, so that's his last name was Hare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was in the division office. He looked after religious liberty and public relations. And,
I love that. That's the kind of person I'd love to hang out with.
Yeah, he had TV going on Sabbath. He had the paper delivered on Sabbath, and he used to put Vegemite in Marmite jars so he wouldn't get caught.
So, his connection to Eric?
Eric, he's Eric's older brother. Eric's older brother.
Yeah. And you met him when you were young? You met him as a...
No, I missed him because he died in 76. I might have seen him like as a baby.
When you were a little baby. Oh, wow. Hey, I'll bring up Kay has written. I'll need to read some of it and read some of it off the screen because it's pertaining to what we're talking about. Some of these, what would you call them? Like a paradox or something. But I don't see it as paradox. I just see it as real humanity.
It's true people.
Yeah, I don't like when I meet Adventists that are all about the propaganda of Adventism and everything's got to be painted as this great cohesive, don't show the dirty laundry kind of thing. I've had people say that to me, but we're just human. Anyway, Kay has written, I think there is a difficulty with embracing critical thinkers who interact with alternative interpretations of various biblical stories. We haven't prepared our congregations well for diverse beliefs. We've delivered church truths in a way that expects people to follow doctrines without questioning. The way church is conducted, with the sermon being the key religious experience, is not conducive to critical thinking. Yeah, well said, Kay. That's a really good thought there. And I think how we can break that chain is by having the kind of conversations we are having. And they're not perfect conversations sometimes. You know, my interview with Peter Veach was fascinating last week. I love talking to Peter and hearing his story. Cal before that, today here with you, Kenton. These are real conversations about real experiences, and we're the ones that can break this kind of looping of having to kind of just be spoon-fed from above.
And the challenges that each generation faces, it's not a new phenomenon. It's been happening every generation of Adventism.
Yeah.
You can see Reuben and even my Uncle Eric and Uncle Lynn, struggling with this stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
And we struggle with it as well.
Yeah.
How do you think outside the square and remain in the square,
Yeah. Darren Pratt has written forward thinking guy and a caring attitude as it should be. Are you talking about Reuben there, Darren? I think so. I'm not sure. He might confirm that. Are you still a Seventh-day Adventist, Kenton?
Well, I'm still a baptized Seventh-day Adventist.
Right.
And I haven't cut the ties because the DNA just runs too deep.
Right.
Unless someone pushes me out, I'm connected.
Yeah.
Sorry. And I would argue that I'm more just as authentic as them.
Yeah, you might be a Reuben. I'll bring up number 12 here. Tell us what this picture is.
Okay.
I think.
So that's Dad on the left in a cowboy outfit in Washington, D.C. with my auntie Bobby, the taller one there, and Auntie Beth.
And they're brother and sister, aren't they?
They're all siblings.
Who's the youngest one?
Auntie Beth.
Auntie Beth, yeah.
So Beth is still there at Cresville.
That's right, yes.
She's wearing earrings and a necklace around her neck these days.
I knew Bobby really well too, and of course Sherilyn and Sherilyn and Robert are her kids. Isn't that a great photo?
So this is 51 before they came back to Australia, because my grandfather Eric. So don't get the Erics confused. So there's Eric Johansen and there's also Eric Hare. Eric Johansen was married to my grandmother Nettie.
Yes.
So he had served as statistical secretary for the GC. He did. You actually can go back to the GC archives and read his report, which is amazing. Like, this is before the days of computers. So he's crunching numbers of all the different divisions from around the world and put them into data set.
Yeah.
So he did all that. Yeah. And this is what you got to remember too. Like, before computers arrived in the 60s.
Yeah.
All these people, there were no calculators. They did it all in their head.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were pretty smart, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
And from what I understand, and I don't know if it's changed since I was at Avondale, but like Adventism got to a point in the 1950s where it sort of plateaued and never ever got any bigger. Hasn't ever got any bigger since.
No.
And that was all done without computers, without email, without mobile phones, without the internet, without TV, without,
Yeah.
They did it through relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, back to Reuben again for a minute, because I feel like I resonate with him. Did he have any writings or any letters left behind that people could have a look at, just to get a greater insight into him?
He probably does. I mean,
there's no book that he released. He wasn't writing stories.
He wasn't a writer like his brother Eric.
Yeah.
But some of the little stories, I'll tell you some little ripper stories about Reuben.
Yeah.
This is a ripper one. So when my dad came back to America with his family in 1953, I think it was, my grandfather bought a brand new Chev, twin-tone Chev in Washington, D.C. He drove it across the states to Los Angeles, and they got the boat from Los Angeles. He had a special trailer made to carry all the luggage. And when they rocked up in Wahroonga, it was the envy of everyone. And you can remember that Wahroonga at this point had dirt roads. There were no sealed roads. So as my family went up and down the roads of Wahroonga in this twin-tone Chev, they gave each other, the neighbours, the royal wave. Auntie Beth particularly, she loved giving the royal wave from the Chev. And it was the envy of everyone. And Uncle Reuben saw dollar signs, and he was retired by this stage, so he'd do what he liked.
Yeah.
And so down the bottom of Fox Valley in his shed, he started moving these sheds. And every person that was a missionary that came back on furlough, he would ask them to bring a Chevy back.
Wow.
And he was selling these sheds tax-free, which wasn't, to the tax department, that wasn't properly legit. And the whole Adventist community knew that Uncle Reuben was selling these dodgy sheds. Anyway, one day, my dad runs up to the division office where my grandfather Eric he was the treasurer of the division for 15 years. And he says, Dad. And Grandpa Eric says, "What, Jim?" And he says, "Dad, guess what? The tax department's found out about Uncle Reuben's dodgy Chevy business. Do you want me to put your Chev away?" And Grandpa was always busy, like type A personality, never enough time to do anything. He says, "Sure, Jim, here's the keys." Dad was like, I think 13 or 14 at the time.
Wow.
And this was his moment. A young boy, first time behind the wheel of a Chev. He was going to make the most of it. So he's running home to drive the Chev into the garage, and he says, I think it was Gordon. He said, "Hey, Gordon, you want to have a go on the Chev?" And Gordon said, "Oh yeah, Jim, that sounds awesome." So they get back to the house, and they thought, well, let's not just drive it into the garage. Let's take it for a spin around the block. So they back the Chevy down the drive, take it for a spin around the block, and then they realize, oh no, there's dust all over it. Our sins will be known. Eric will know what we've done. So they decide to wash it all down in the drive, and then it's time to put the Chev away in the garage. Anyway, the two of them get behind into the front seat, and Dad starts up the Chev. Everything's going fine, and then he goes to hit the brake, and the Chev lurches forward through the back of the garage wall, and there's glass and asbestos and rubbish everywhere, and the Chev is actually balancing on the end of the slab of the garage, and that was the end of Grandpa's Chev. So there's another story about Uncle Reuben.
I love it. Wow.
These are real people that did real things.
Yeah.
They weren't just like ticking boxes and believing what they were told to believe.
Yeah. Hey, Darren, just slight change of topic. Darren Pratt has written, was it you who used to sign our class roles as Des Ford, Kenton?
No, it wasn't me. I was a little goody two-shoes back then.
Now, let's bring in this photo here, number 13, 1952. And I think this is your dad.
Yeah, that's another family shot again.
This is Dad, Bobby, and Beth again, is it?
Yeah, and their parents.
With their parents.
Yeah, Eric and Nettie.
So that's Eric Johansen and Nettie.
Yeah, and that's before they came back to Australia. You can see the very American environment there.
You look at your dad, he's got a little bit of American look about him there.
Yeah, and he had that, I think it was like a corduroy coat, which my mother fell for when he came back to Wahroonga in 53.
Now, Beth, as you said, she's up at Crestville now. Yep. What's her last name?
Well, she goes by Johansen, but she married as Lohman.
That's right.
Yeah. And she used to teach typing and business studies at Avondale when I was there.
Yeah, no, I know Beth. Yeah. Oh, that's great.
She's a rebel like all of us.
Yeah.
We're all rebels.
Rebels with a cause. Rebels with a cause, not without a cause. Now, will we bring up the next one? This is now in Wahroonga, or still in Wahroonga, I should say.
So you can see that Dad's a little fatter there. He was known as Joe So Fat. He was made fun of by his classmates. The button in the middle is hardly meeting in the middle.
Yes.
But everybody else is pretty much the same. You can see Uncle Lynn.
This is 1953.
Yeah.
Wow. So how old was your dad there?
He would have been about 14.
Wow, right.
Yeah.
So there's Bobby, Beth, your dad.
Yep.
Yeah.
And behind
Eric,
his
Eric
Uncle
and
Lynn.
Nettie, Eric and Nettie on the right. And who's the uncle?
Uncle Lynn. Uncle Lynn and Uncle Eric left the church during World War II, and they actually, between the two of them, produced Australia's first electrical violin. Uncle Eric used to play jazz during World War II, and he was broadcast on radio in Adelaide. And yeah, it was a bit of a rebellion happening there with the music and the lifestyle, as you can imagine.
Yeah. Eric and Len did that.
Yeah, they did that. So Eric was a specialist in radio. They both joined the Air Force. Eric worked in radios and electrics, and then worked in carpentry, building planes.
Now, this is Michelle Phyllis, and Michelle was a Lyman, wasn't she? Is Michelle?
Yes,
Beth?
she's Beth's.
Michelle, you're Beth's daughter, aren't you?
Yeah.
Good to see you, Michelle. I'm good friends with Michelle and her husband. Love the family stories and photos, Kenton. And yes, Mum Beth is a rebel, and I've learned so much from her way of thinking. And Tony is your sister,
younger sister of Michelle.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know all this. Just recapping for everyone else. Good to see you watching, Michelle. That's great. So this next picture, now we're zeroing in a bit on your dad here.
Yeah.
And
this is Dad at Avondale.
On his graduation.
Yeah.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah. So
what year is this one?
Well, I'm guessing it's about 1960. 59, 60.
Right.
Dad didn't actually graduate with his graduating class. He came back and finished his subjects afterwards, but he would have had this photo taken pretty much at that time.
Was he under Des Ford at some time?
No.
He kind of
I asked Dad about Des Ford, and he actually didn't engage or connect with Des Ford at all.
Interesting.
He thought for himself. Like, I've got tapes where he's like being grilled at the conference office about his beliefs.
Yeah. And
he had a really good handle on his Greek. And he always argued for me, a pretty sound place in front of people like Bruce Price, I guess, Standish, those type of people.
Yeah.
And I said, were you connected with Des Ford? He would have probably had him for summer school and stuff like that, but he wasn't a Fordite. He thought for himself, stood on his own two legs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which Ford would have encouraged.
Well, he would have embraced. He would have respected that.
Yeah. Now, here's your dad and your mum.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about this photo.
Yeah, they're very young and idealistic there.
Your mum's still got that lovely smile that she showed from that Hobart picture.
Hasn't been shattered. I think that's their engagement.
Right.
Yeah, that's before they went to New Zealand.
Right. How long ago was it that your mum passed?
It's about, where are we? 2000. Just thinking here, I'm about 6 years.
Yeah. Okay. Not that long.
No. And she was a strong woman as well.
Yeah.
She studied when she did her matric. She got a scholarship to do medicine at Sydney Uni.
Yeah.
And a family friend put it this way: in those days, university was the devil's ground.
Yeah.
And any woman that even considered to going to university was, pushing the boundaries.
Yeah.
So I respect her for that.
Yeah. I like people that ask why and push boundaries.
Yeah.
Where this is
this is a great photo.
Yeah.
I'll just pull up a larger.
Oh, there's Deidre and Alan Lindsay there.
Correct.
That's interesting because he does the intro to the Let the Sonshine video that we're going to watch a little bit of in a minute.
Yep. And there's Dad and Mum on the back on the left-hand side.
Yeah.
And forgive me for not remembering all the names, but those who know them will remember their names. Ed Parker in the middle with his wife.
Yeah.
And then there's Ross Goldstone on the right.
Where? Oh, yes, up the top there.
Yeah. And then in the middle there's Austin Cook and his wife on the right, and another elder pastor, which I don't remember, on
Right.
the middle right. But
Now,
that's from the mission team in New Zealand. So when Mum and Dad first got their call in, they went to the South Island, New Zealand. They spent 5 years on mission teams there and did nothing else but like look after the mission and also promote it and visit all the interests.
Yes.
It was pretty hard work. They went to many towns like Christchurch, Blenheim, Dunedin, Invercargill, sorry. Right in the South Island. And another person they worked with was Ron Thomas. I don't know if anybody remembers Ron Thomas, but he was a bit of a force in his time.
Yeah.
He's a bit older than Dad, but still alive. So yeah, that was the mission work in the 60s in conservative South New Zealand.
And this next one, tell us a little bit about this. This is October 1965.
Yeah, so there's Dad again with Eric, Beth, his mum, and Bobby on the right.
So that's Nettie in the middle.
Nettie's in the middle.
And
she's retired. She's pretty close to retirement there.
Yeah, wow. And there's Bobby, and your dad is the tallest one there, isn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, but the only one missing there is Eric. You'll see Eric in a few minutes.
And that's Len.
Yeah, that's Len.
Is that Beth on the left?
Yes.
It is too, yeah. Wow.
She's gorgeous there, isn't she?
Yeah. And she went to West Oz for a while too, didn't she?
Well, she was working in South Australia for a long time from memory.
Might be South Australia, I'm thinking, yeah.
Yeah. So she taught English and French.
Yeah.
From memory in South Australia. I think that's where she met her husband and father of her children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to bring it up now to this one. Tell us about, as we're getting now closer to the whole kind of this whole gospel revival era that we've kind of been building this incredible background to. I love this groundswell of information. It's going to really help us understand what actually exploded on the face of Adventism in the 70s. So is that showing on the screen, that one?
Yeah, it's showing.
Tell us about this picture.
Okay, so this idea is tramping. It's a New Zealand word. In Australia, we call it bushwalking. But in New Zealand, they call it tramping. So this is a tramp camp in the snow behind Warburton in the 60s, probably about 67, 68. And Dad got this idea of tramping from New Zealand. He went and visited places in the snow. His great uncle Rosendahl, Eddie Rosendahl, actually climbed Mount Cook about 2 or 3 times.
Wow.
And this was back in the days when you had to walk with canvas and like heavy gear, not the light gear that we use now, leather. So yeah, this is where that idea came from. Tramp camps, and he's remembered for that. And since I graduated, I have to admit, there's been a long line of queue of people, just telling me memories of how Dad reached them and touched them in ministry.
Interesting.
So visiting their siblings in hospital, in prison, baptizing them, marrying people, giving them advice. It's just been endless, because as a child, for family reasons, he was put down in my earshot. You know, he was just not trying to think of the word, but the Antichrist.
Right, like the black sheep of the family.
It's just the tension that fell out between myself and him and my mother.
Right.
But actually, in real life, he's remembered fondly.
Yeah, he seemed to really understand that gospel notion of pastoral care. Big
time.
Yeah. This is a interesting picture of him. Hang on.
This actual picture blows my brain.
It's quite small on the screen, but
I actually took it off a wedding shot. So the couple next to him, they're signing their their wedding certificate. But what blows my brain about that photo is that's the day after my twin brothers were born in 73.
Wow.
So they were born in March 23, 1973. This is March 24. So Mum said he rocked up for the birth of my twin brothers, Peter and Paul. And then the next day he's doing this wedding service.
Wow.
I couldn't do that. I could not do that. That's how devoted he was.
Yeah.
To his job. You know, performed a wedding even though he just
had twins.
Just had twins. So that one just really tugs at my heart. I could not do that.
Yeah. He was immersed in, probably also immersed in the birth as well, though.
Oh, he was. Well, he was present for the actual birth.
Yeah. He's not a distant kind of person.
No, double banger.
Yeah. And this one I'll bring up this is an interesting photo. Tell us a bit about this one.
So the other thing that blew my brain about my parents is they had a family of 6.
Mm.
They often entertained international guests. So they had people that came across America doing talks on family life, you know, different workshops. And they often would stay, I remember, in a hotel down in Box Hill, like a motel. And then they would take them out for entertainment. So this is up at Hillsville Sanctuary, which is actually the place of Victoria's oldest mission, Aboriginal mission, Corranderg.
Mm.
And this is us as a family taken by an international guest at Hillsville Sanctuary. So on the left is my older brother, Jim. I'm sitting on my father's left side with the sun on my face. And my younger sister in pink. My older sister in pink, Morel. And my dad and one of the twins is in his other arm. And then there's my brother, Ted, another twin in my mother's arms. And there's my mother in a onesie.
6 kids.
Yeah, busy. And the older 3, I have to say, brought up the younger 3. I can remember my sister changing my nappies before church to get ready for Sabbath school. I can remember that because she used to pin me in the hip with the safety pin. So, yeah, very real.
Now, would you, at that time that picture was taken, was your dad at the East Paran Church by that stage?
That would be about 70, 73, 74.
Right.
He didn't leave there till 76.
Someone I'd spoken to said that your dad had a really great gospel focus, then went away and did a bit more study or something happened and he came back with extra fire in his belly.
I think it was the summer schools at Avondale. He was actually studying to do an MA in the 70s. And one Hans La Rondell was a Reformation theologian.
Yes, that's who it was.
And that really connected and resonated with him. And also Hans La Rondell was a specialist in the Psalms, which is poetry, and that resonated with Dad as well. Just the tension, the heartfelt tension between the ups and downs, that resonated with Dad as well. But Dad came back to Paran with that Reformation message of Martin Luther, and Romans, and that was sort of like that sort of ignited a whole lot of stuff.
What year was that he came back?
I don't know. You have to ask people that were there at the time. But I just know it was the early 70s.
Because this is now entering that time period that I'm often interested in, where between, I don't know if you could say 73 and 79, there's a kind of gospel revival in Adventism where I think they grasp a unique kind of version of the gospel, blending it in with Adventism, letting go of a lot of stuff, clinging on to the atonement at the cross. Jesus is front and center in a practical sense. This kind of exciting kind of Adventism, which kind of seems to have burst out there for a while, and in America as well. There's lots of gospelers that have watched the show that this was happening in America as well.
Yeah.
And then of course, with Glacier View and everything shut down after that. It's an era that I love talking about because it's an era that I wish we could kind of pull out, detach from, and kind of put out there for, let the sun shine kind of on it a bit more.
Yeah. So I was thinking about this before as I was waiting for you. See, Dad was a person that was a creative like you, Peter, and a creative like me, but he also had a mathematical mind. He was really good with math, so he was good with his Greek, and he had the gift of making often issues or subjects that were complex to people really simple.
Right.
And so his message resonated with the folk at East Paran. East Paran at that time was on fire. You can see there's the group there on top of Mount Buller.
Tell us a bit about this picture.
This is a church camp to Mount Buller. One of the church members had a lodge up there, the one at the front. Just don't remember his name. He was a carpenter as well. He owned a lodge. And they're the members behind him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they would go away for a church camp to Mount Buller. They'd go up to Robinvale for a church camp and just ski all weekend behind a boat, eating grapes and rockmelon and great watermelon, and then they have a sermon on the weekend. Yeah. It was just an annual thing. The church was really dynamic, and the church was leading in lots of ways. Like, it was the first church, as I understand, in the division to ordain a lady elder. Muriel Ewing. So they were pushing the boundaries, and often the conference would try to move Dad on, but the church would protest and say, no, we want to keep him. And so a couple of moves were pushed back. That's the church group.
Do you recognise some of the faces in there?
I do recognise some of the faces. My mum's on the right, and I was like very small at the time.
So that's your mum on the far right with the hand on her leg, is that it?
Yeah.
She's got that great smile going on again.
Yeah, she's happy.
Yeah.
I think that might be Gordon Box behind her.
Wow.
I think there's a McMahon behind Gordon.
Yeah.
It's Addy Wisbauer is the guy that was the carpenter. He's behind the lady.
Yes, see him there, yeah.
The twins are in front with my sister Morelle and the white skivvy and my brother Jim. There's McMahon's on the far left-hand side over there.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, I think it looks like Peter McGowan and sort of like in the left there, but I'm not sure.
Right.
So yeah, the church was on fire.
Vibrant and happy, yeah.
Yeah.
Joy Butler has written, Des Ford and Jim Johansen profoundly influenced my understanding of God and set me on a path of more open Adventism. Praise God. Love all your history, Kenton. Thank you.
Amen.
That's great. Someone else has written, this is Terry Atkins. I remember Jim Johansen at East Paran Church when a double ring ceremony was frowned upon by the men at the division. Jim pushed on, not worrying about the consequences. Forward thinking.
He was unorthodox, and he had a hard time for it too. Like he used to visit me at Avondale, and he used to say to me, "You don't realise how good you've got it."
Yeah.
And just trying to.
Who said that? Sorry, I've just missed that. Who said that to you?
Dad.
Oh, okay.
He would say, "In my time, when I was at Avondale, that the most rebellious thing you could do was escape on a Saturday night up College Drive and buy some lollies from the milk bar up at Freeman's Drive, and or get on top of the water tower." That was like
the really water tower was a big one, yeah.
Pushing the boundaries,
yeah.
And I used to think, oh, Dad, like you like to make a big name for yourself, don't you? But looking back now, I think he actually did push the boundaries.
Oh, yeah. Tell us about this picture here.
This is, from memory, this is at Sherlin's wedding.
Right.
So only Bobby on the right-hand side there with the rose on her cardigan.
Yeah.
There's Uncle Lynn behind her, and beside him, Uncle Eric, who came back to the church after the World War II and with his family. And he also is remembered for working at the Sydney Adventist Hospital and looking after the Adventist Book Centre in Adelaide, amongst many other things. I think he has kids that have worked at college there in the administration block. There's Grandpa on the left and Grandma Nettie in front. And there's Dad on the far left and Auntie Beth in front of Dad. Yeah, so that was taken at Sherilyn's wedding. I think it was 76 when both my twin brothers, Peter and Paul, were page boys.
Yeah, okay. That would have been cute.
That's at College Church. That's the main church in Cooranbong.
Yes, Memorial Church.
Memorial.
That is. I recognize the curtains. They're still there from the youth department downstairs. Now, what's this one? This looks very interesting. Tell us about this.
Well, I said to you before that both of Dad's grandparents, Johann Johansen and Robert Hare, were boat builders. And boat building in carpentry is like the pinnacle of carpentry. Like if you can build a boat that doesn't leak without glue, you know, you're doing pretty well.
Yeah.
So Dad always took it on himself to do what his ancestors had done.
Right.
So, like Uncle Walter built his own house in Warburton, Dad had to build his own house as well.
Right.
And just like his grandpa, Robert and Johann had built boats, he had to build a boat as well.
Yeah.
The funny story about this boat is that he made this boat when he was the assistant youth director in Victoria in the late 60s. And he started building it in the lounge room in the front of the house. And he actually had to take out the lounge room window, which was the conference house.
Yeah.
To get it out. So there's a few little funny stories like that. That's us down at Black Rock on Port Phillip Bay.
Beautiful. I love these stories. They make everything come alive. Now, this one here. So I'm just kind of taking the wheel here with just going through the photos, if that's all right.
Otherwise,
I have no reason to do that. Tell us about this one. Oh, there's the twins.
Yeah.
And the family.
This is our send-off in 1976 when Dad was moved on from East Paran, closing of a chapter, to take up pastoring at Vermont, which became One Turner Church and Ferntree Gully Church. You can see my twin brothers at the front there with St. Peter and St. Paul. They're there in their jeans on a Sabbath. So my mother must have okayed that.
Yeah.
I'm there beside them with my brother Jim with the red shirt and my brother Ted and my sister Morelle on the right. And my mum is looking at my father very affectionately.
Yeah,
so she sparkle in her eyes.
She adores him, doesn't she?
Yeah.
Which one's you?
I'm the guy with the lighter. I think it's lighter blue, little suit, taller than my twin brothers.
Oh, down here, yes, with the blondie. Yeah. Now that was 76, the send off.
Yeah.
The recent reunion that you had in at the actual church, so really was a part of the celebration of that era. Is obviously between 73 to 76, is it? That's kind of.
Dad was there from 69.
Oh, 69.
76. Right. And when he first took up, well, at the earliest point there, when he took up pastoring East Paran, he had also North Fitzroy, so he had two churches. But I think most of the 70s there, he just had one, which is very unusual as well. Like most of the ministers had at least two.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So the era where Bob Wolfgram and these guys were doing all the street preaching and stuff, that was shepherded by your dad and was in this period, this kind of...
No, it all started far earlier than that.
Even earlier than that?
Yeah.
When was that kicking off? And I'm hoping to have Lowell and Bob on the show soon as well.
Yeah, well, I've been talking about this with Harry Ballas as well.
Yeah.
Both Harry and Robert became professors of sociology at Monash University, and Harry went on to be a vice chancellor for the Federation University. But anyway, Harry says, no, definitely it dates back to 67, 68, when they came back from New Zealand. And Robert at that stage, I think, was at the academy still as a high school student.
Yeah, okay.
A little bit earlier.
Right.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting when I hopefully will be able to. I was talking to Lowell in the last week or two about trying to get them both on. It would be great to have them both on.
Oh yeah.
So Harry was involved as well with East Puran Church.
Yes, we'll see Harry. Do we go into this next chapter now?
No. Well, yeah. Well, up to you. What
Okay.
Other things you wanted? Other things you wanted to cover?
Oh, there's lots.
Before we
no
do
more to cover. I think we've set the context.
Set the context.
I'm ready to launch into the street preaching.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
You ready for that? Do you want me to pause?
I'm ready.
Okay.
What I'm just going to quickly suggest, if people don't mind, is a quick little 2-minute toilet break, if everyone's okay with that. And I might even just put a little bit of music on in the background. Is that okay with you, everyone? We're just going to have a quick toilet break, and that's a good divider to the two. We've set the scene. Now we're going to get into this whole street preacher era, and so I'll just put some music on, and we'll be right back, everyone.
Carry me away, lift me from this place, ease my burdens, Lord. Take me to your world, let me see your face, carry me away. When I close my eyes, I can see your face, and an ocean of love washes over me, and I am in your presence. Carry me away, lift me from this place, ease my burdens, Lord. Take me to your world, let me see your face, carry me away. When I hear your voice, the power of your word, emotions of peace flood right through my heart. I live for you, and I embrace your holiness. Carry me away, lift me from this place, ease my burdens, Lord. Take me to your world, let me see your face, carry me away. Carry me away, lift me from this place, ease my burdens, Lord. Take me to your world, let me see your face, carry me away. from this place. Ease my burdens, Lord. Take me to your world. Let me see your face. Carry me away. Carry me away. Lift me from this place. Ease my burdens, Lord. Take me to your world. Let me see your face. Carry me away.
And welcome back to part 2 of our number 2 series on the 70s Gospel Revival and Adventism, season 5, episode 3. I'm talking with Kenton Johansen. We've had a fantastic chat there, Kenton. We just had one of the first intermissions I've ever done. And it's a good idea to give people a little bit of a break, and it
Sure.
divides the story we're telling here. We've given an amazing background. I so appreciate the work you've done and willingness to share this backdrop to this time period. How do you define this? Like, people love to have a name to something, don't they? What was this era? I've said 70s SDA Gospel Revival. Some people call it.
Well,
the
Dad
gospel
always called it the street
revival.
preaching. The street
I
preaching.
was just going to say the street preaching is what I remember as because the ramifications of what your dad was doing, and Bob Wolfgram and Lowell Tarling and all these creatives, by the time it kind of reached us at this end in 78, 79, we started playing music influenced by these guys. And there was another bunch of people, I think, called Jam, Jesus and Me, from Melbourne in the late 70s, and they would come up and we'd do stuff together, and we started doing street preaching from 79 to 83 kind of time period. So it really was an incredible explosion of this very creative time. So street preaching was definitely a title that we added to it.
Yeah, and I said to Dad, like 30 years later, 20 years later, I said, what was the job that you most enjoyed, Dad? And he'd always go back to his youth work as in Victoria and this street preaching thing, because it was just a time where they really rocked. They had a great time. And he enjoyed the work. He loved helping and supporting and enabling people. So as we were saying in the last set of slides, Dad and Mum came back from New Zealand in 1967, where he was asked to be the assistant youth director in Victoria. But he was more like the youth director. And to be honest, he actually did fall out with the youth director, who was Lou Lansdowne. And other people have told me that Lou wasn't always an easy person to work with. So I forgive Dad for that. But immediately he used his enthusiasm to fire up a whole lot of stuff here in Melbourne and Victoria. He worked alongside a guy called Bert Gibbs and Janetti Woods and started up Melbourne Adventist Bushwalking Association. That was a bushwalking club that lasted the full length of 50 years.
Wow.
Had a program for every month of the year for 50 years. And then the other group that's really dynamic in this point that's going to be a catalyst is the glowworms. So Harry Ballas is pivotal here in the storytelling. He was an actual member of the glowworms.
Right.
And I just wanted to reflect on who was in the glowworms.
Will I bring up that picture as well? There's a picture of a youth sing-along glowworms.
Yeah.
Also, the Jimmy Owens and the High Time you heard. Will I bring those up in a minute?
Bring them both up.
Okay. So here we first up we'll bring. Is this going to play some music as well, or I think this is just
Probably
a
not
picture at this stage? There was a clip you did
I did. I did.
audio.
I gave you the recording of the Youth
Yeah,
Congress in Canberra.
I think that's on here.
Yeah, that's that one.
Yeah. So this is to do with the glowworms.
Yes, this is their recording from the 1970 Youth Congress in Canberra.
Yes, I've got the book, the words and chords that
Yep.
they use for that as well. Let me just try a little experiment here. I think I can. This is. Tell me if you can still see this.
That's the back of that record you just saw.
This is important because we can mention. Oh wow! I'm just recognizing these names now.
So these are
Fidelis
all,
Records was owned by Tom Mitchell.
yeah, he had his own label.
Yeah, and he
here
passed
in,
away not that long ago.
yeah, here in Nuttawading, where I still live.
Yes.
We
got guitars, Paul Woodward,
and
Hayden
Hayden
Judd,
Judd.
and Moretta is your mum,
Yeah,
and Tom Mitchell. Wow.
yeah. And also in that group, and these are the best information I have at hand at the moment.
Yeah.
Noni Jackson, her
Yes.
father was a psychologist. Bev Smith, Debbie Reed, who you might see later in the movie, Chopper Reed's sister. Chopper Reed passed away a couple of years ago. He was a larger-than-life person.
Yeah.
Cheryl and Ray Dickens. I knew their dad, Roy, and I saw Cheryl several times around Greensboro. Harry had a sister called Vasily. There was Noel and Arthur Winsenreed, Nigel and Ian Simpson. So quite a few siblings in this.
Yeah.
Not just an ensemble, it's more like a choir.
Yes.
And if you pull up that record from Jimmy Owens, I don't have any actual pictures or footage of the group in action, but this is as close as I can get. Elwyn Scale took home movie, but we haven't been able to unearth it.
I've just got to reboot the drive. It dropped off there for a second.
That's all right. I'll keep on talking.
You do that, and I'll just. Sorry, you keep talking. Go for it.
So early on, as Harry recollects, there were no microphones. There was no trailer. It was a time when Harry was working for White and Gillespie. Now, White and Gillespie had its origins in the Echo Publishing House before Signs Publishing House in North Fitzroy.
Yes.
And they were making records on the hit parade. I'm talking top 10.
Well, they did this. They signed the Seekers.
Probably.
Yeah,
and a whole lot of people, and they had. I used to go to their office there. Where was it? Coburg, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And they had gold recording. Gold recording artists. So they were making big time. These are Adventist record labels.
Yeah. One of my good friends, Steve Peets. He his grandfather was one of the co-owners of that label.
I remember Ron Gillespie and Alan White. Alan White gave me a fair bit of work while I was at Avondale. Get through. Yeah. Now this is as close as I can get. This is the Jimmy Owens Singers, and you can see the A-frame mini skirts there.
Yes.
And the guys in the glowworms all had shirts to match the color of the girls.
Right.
And the only thing really different, they didn't wear jewelry, but everything else was the same.
So that was the look. Yeah.
That was the look. That's where it came from.
It's interesting to me that this time period was really creative. I remember going down for work experience in 1978 to the Media Centre in Sydney and did my work experience there. And there was still this creative vibe going. Once Glacier View hit and the suppression happened and everyone lost their jobs, and Harry Ballas has written that great book about it, which I happen to have right in front of me. If people can find this book, seek it online, pay whatever you can for it. Leaving the Adventist Ministry, a study of the process of exiting. It's incredible, this book that Harry has written and put together. That era, post the exciting era that we're talking about, brought in the kind of this era of suppression, and that creativity died away. So this, I often lament this incredible creative media connection and music and production skills and artwork and songwriting and whatnot, and was really taking off, and then it was just kind of cut short. Imagine if we'd spent the last 40 years, imagine if the administration of the Adventist Church had got behind this kind of movement, where it would be now, how much more exciting the Adventist Church would have been if they had not cut it off at the ankles.
It's a huge price to pay.
Yeah.
So Harry was saying that while he was working at W&G, White and Gillespie, that was their acronym, shortened label.
Yeah.
There was this guy at the Victoria Market who was a bit of an alcoholic, and his name was Carpenter. He can't remember his first name. And this guy Carpenter became the first convert of the glowworms.
Wow.
And at the time, Pastor Don Self was the minister at Glen Huntly, and the Glen Huntly crew took on this Carpenter guy and nurtured him and looked after him. And that was the whole ethos of this street preaching thing. It wasn't good getting on your soapbox and telling everybody to go to hell.
No,
it was more caring and just sharing a heartfelt message, more like a Bob Dylan.
Yeah, they were sharing good news. The good news. Yeah.
It wasn't.
I think sorry, it wasn't what?
Yeah, it wasn't telling people to go to hell.
Yeah. I'll just quickly bring up on the screen. Joy has written. You mentioned Lou before, and Joy says, I worked with both of them, Lou and Jim. I was their secretary. Some tension, but I liked both. Tramp camps with Jim was a major feature for me. Tramp camps, I like that. Darren just raised an interesting question. So would you say that this 70s revival was part of the paving on the road towards Glacier View? I don't think it was an intentional paving, but I think the people were worried about Ellen White's authority being jeopardized, the behind the scenes theological academic tensions that were going on with Des and Heppenstall and all the academics versus the more conservative movement that wanted to chop that theology down, the admin wanting to please one side more than the other, them noticing this worldly movement of Adventists all around the world that were exploring. When they noticed this, they even were more galvanized at bringing an end to it. So indirectly, I think it did bring Glacier View to a head. And sadly, when it brought Glacier View to a head and the defrocking of Des, it definitely killed the flourishing movement that was.
But if you look back through the jacarandas of the late 60s and early 70s, the theological classes are huge.
Yeah.
I think like they're 30 or 40 people.
Well,
if you wanted to go somewhere and be someone, you became a minister.
Yeah.
And that was quite different after Glacier View.
Yeah. Well, I think I've mentioned many times that I loved that era. I was on campus. Dad was a lecturer at Avondale, 67, 68 to 71. And then we came back 78. And it was still kind of flourishing. But come 80, 81, it was just gone. I didn't realize why until a few years later. Yeah. But I remember
what was your dad lecturing in, Peter?
What's that?
What did he lecture in?
Sure, boy, I should know that. I think it was history, geography, history. It wasn't a theological subject. Yeah. So he kind of bypassed a lot of that kind of controversial era. And he's a real hands-on, get down, just live life, be creative, do your thing kind of guy. But I remember as a young boy, that 68 to 71, this incredible vibe on campus at Avondale. And hey, I found that, just to interrupt myself, I found the Glowworms sing-along. Let's see if we can play a little bit of it. Did you say Harry was in the group? So let me just see if it works. It may or may not. It's loading. Let's see what happens. Here we go.
The first song was by Tom Mitchell.
Can you hear this?
Yeah. That's their theme song.
Right. I don't know how to click to the next track.
This is the theme song for the Congress.
Right. Oh, here we go. I think I can. I can move forward.
It's recorded onto my smartphone because I couldn't find another way to digitize
Sorry,
it.
what was that?
I recorded it onto my smartphone.
That's all right. We're
I'll be
getting
quiet while you
getting
do
an
it.
idea of it. I love it. It's got that vibrant, uplifting, happy, good news message for all ages, and this was for Congress as well.
Yeah.
I'll just click through a few of the. Yes, that's the book that I've got just over here to my right.
You found one.
Yes, I've got that copy of that. Yeah, I'll see if I can find it in a minute. I'll just click through a few of the tracks here.
Yep.
It's great. Let's just I'll just see what I'll just click randomly through. Is that Ray Dixon?
Yeah.
Oh, classic. So Ray was involved as well.
Yeah, he was Cheryl's brother. And I used to know Roy. Roy was about the age of my Uncle Eric and Lynn.
Ray Dixon
Mm-hmm.
was Cheryl's brother.
No, Cheryl's brother, yeah. I don't know. Maybe I got that wrong.
I'm not sure. Yeah, but
so there was a Ray Dickens and a Dixon, maybe.
Dixon,
that's yeah.
Well, Ray Dixon had, in the secular world, had a hit in 1957, A Town Like Alice, and then he became an Adventist soon after.
Oh, right.
And became an Adventist minister and worked heaps with Tom. So Tom produced on Fidelis Records heaps of albums, and Rob Dixon only died somewhere between 2 and 5 years ago.
No, I got those two wires crossed.
Right.
Because Harry was talking about Ray Dickens, who was also in the group, and there's a Dixon. So
yes.
Two Rays.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, it's good. I'm glad we've found that little. That's a gem. Can people get a copy of the actual recording of? No.
Like I said, that was hard work. I had to borrow a hi-fi system from a friend with a record player, put it on my iPhone. I've got a record. I've got a record here, but I know, as you said, Tom Mitchell passed away last year.
It was last year, right?
I think it was a year before, and around Kempsey, and there's probably a couple of records there.
Yeah. I might even try and find some and make them available. This was another picture you put up earlier to show a bit of the vibe of the time.
Okay, so I'll talk a bit about this.
Yeah.
So this is 19. That stuff we talked about with the low worms, that was for 3 years before 1970, where it was a little bit more like they practiced every week at my parents' place in North Box Hill. But in 1970, the Austin Cook mission that we saw there in South New Zealand came to Melbourne, and Mum and Dad were asked to promote it. But Dad didn't take the typical line of dead men do tell tales. He did something a little bit different. But what he did do was a tried and true technique tested by my great-grandfather, Robert Hare. Now, what Robert Hare would do when he rocked up into a town like Ararat or Ballarat, wherever it was out there in the country, he would pitch a tent, and his little tent like we used to have at camp meetings beside it. And then he would drag out his kids who we spoke about, Reuben, Eric, Ruth, Nettie, and Enid, and they would play their instruments. Reuben would be on horn, Eric would be on trumpet, which we all know, Ruth, my grandmother, maybe on violin, and Enid on triangle, and they would play like they were busking, like, you know, down the mall. They would play these tunes and they would create curiosity, and people would gather as a crowd, and then they would be ushered into the tent for the meeting. So that's how they got their numbers. And so I can imagine, I haven't been able to check this with Dad, but I can imagine this is where Dad got his idea, because what Dad did in 1970, 60 years later, was he got his group, the Glowworms. He parked a trailer that had been made by, here we got here, Elwyn Scale, in front of the Forum Theatre. Now, back in Melbourne in 1970, there was no City Loop. There was just two railway stations, Spencer Street and Flinders Street. Flinders Street was the busiest railway station in the Southern Hemisphere, if not the world. Like, back in its time, it moved more passengers than any other railway station. It was huge. It's like still the icon of Melbourne, like the Opera House or Sydney Harbour Bridge. And so people were moving past the Forum Theatre on Flinders Street. The Forum Theatre is this Persian-shaped architecture with like domes and stuff above it, opposite Rupert Murdoch's Herald and Weekly Times. And they would park this trailer, sing the songs that you just heard, and crowds gathered crowds. And by the time they were ready, they had hundreds that they would usher into the building. And when they got into the building, they didn't hear Dead Men Do Tell Tales.
No.
They heard a sacred concert with Dad on the trombone, Mum on the piano, Tom on the theatre organ, another guest artist for that night. So
I love that creativity. Yeah, I love that creativity.
Yeah.
I'll bring up a couple of pictures while you're sharing more about this street preaching era that we're talking about.
Okay, so I don't know. I went to a cabaret, which is like the equivalent version of Pathfinders, with my daughter about a year ago, and we had a concert up at Cockatoo, and they had the fluorescent lights on, like the ultraviolet lights on, and the kids were wearing like these fluoro-coloured orange hats and yellow hats, and in the ultraviolet light, it just goes boom, like it just hits you in the face. You know what I mean?
Yeah, stands out. Yeah.
Well, you can imagine this is what Dad did. He had the stage lit with his ultraviolet lights, the girls in their A-frame miniskirts and the guys in their fluoro shirts, and it was just like technicolor, like psychedelic technology. It just was electric, and it just made people like, whoa, what's going on here?
Yeah,
like, look at this.
Yeah, it stood out. Yeah.
And so it really did stand out. And that's what Dad then transferred to that Congress in Canberra.
And what's exciting about that is you're involving people creatively. Like, people love being involved with that stuff.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you see something beautiful, it makes your heart skip a beat or two, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And this group just didn't do the stuff in the Forum Theatre. As Harry was saying, they would visit country churches like Mildura, other country churches. Other people have told me they would park the trailer in front of the GPO, which is like Burke Street, the centre of Melbourne. They would park it on the steps of Parliament House. They would park it different areas around the CBD, but also different country areas around town. And they'd always pull a crowd. So they were interesting times. They were heady days. It was a time of the Vietnam War, but their youthful enthusiasm spread, and then it spun off, as we reflected a week or two ago with Carl at East Paran, how you had groups studying a cafe there on the McDougalls, Peter and Jenny McDougall setting up Food for Thought. And there were a whole lot of other ministries and stuff that set up as well, with like Salt, Share a Little Truth. It's a business that's still going. That evolved into Helen and Elwyn Scales' Dulhunty Park. So, and these ministries have been going for the last 50 or more years. They're still going.
Incredible.
The Scales have transferred now north of Newcastle. So the ramifications, the ripple effect has kept on lasting. It didn't die.
Yeah. And again, this is something that I can't even think of the word. upsets me that this is not held up on high. Like I think I've said several times, one of the reasons I started SDA&A was I wanted to create a platform initially to and both tie into this era, to bring into Adventism an understanding of their sense of creative history. And the people I wanted to bring in to have interviews with were Bob Wolfgram, Ray Dixon before he died. I wanted people to have a sense of history within Adventism in the creative realm. I wanted to help encourage people and interview people in the now that are being creative. And I
Yeah.
wanted to kind of help put a bit of a platform to encourage the next generation. So SDA&A started with, that was my focus. And so in some ways, this little mini series we're doing here of the 70s gospel era, I'm getting a chance to do something I actually really haven't had a chance to do. But
Yeah.
what upsets me with Adventist leadership is their unwillingness to create a sense of history amongst the creatives of Adventism. By the time we hit the mid 80s, if I'd mentioned Bob Wolfgram or Ray Dixon, no one would know who they were. Whereas if you go into the secular world, we mentioned Bob Dylan earlier, if you read any guitar magazine, you're going to see Bob Dylan mentioned, Jimi Hendrix mentioned, the Beatles, Rolling Stones. You'll hear the icons and people that were of the past. You'll hear about what's going on now, and then you'll look at some new stuff coming up.
Yeah.
I wish there was something within Adventism, and I'm hoping that today and our interview with Cal begins a bit of a spark where we're actually uplifting the creatives of the past, not so they become a nostalgic thing, but so we can see the thread of what happened then continuing today and breathing life into the future.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I just, to me, the church has this incredible opportunity with this legacy, this history, and they do nothing to lift it up.
Well, you asked if I'm still an Adventist. Yes, I am still an Adventist. And the reason I'm still an Adventist is because I still have hope. I haven't lost my hope. I want the church to embrace like change and healthy behavior and healthy and responsible, way of living. That's what Adventism is to me.
Yeah.
And yeah, so hopefully they can. I haven't written them off totally, Peter.
Yeah, I've written them off. What I'm doing is going, okay, I'm not an Adventist anymore, but hey, I love this kind of culture here that I was a part of. Why can't I be the guitar magazine that brings together this sense of history? And maybe there might even be a spin-off podcast where all I do is focus on Adventist creatives and history there. I'll just bring up, before we keep moving, a couple of comments. David Klopovich has written quite an interesting history. Would you say that it directly influenced your own approach when you were a minister, or was it more indirect, or did you just forge your own way as a rebel simply because it's in your DNA? That's a good question.
As I said, I didn't realize till I read Lowell Tarling's book, with this
incredible book. Yeah.
Which it's mostly about CBs and loopy people, but my dad's also in there as an example of the other side. And
the fringe.
I didn't realize that I was on the fringe until I got into mainstream Adventism, and I felt like a fish out of water. I mean, I used to rock up to church in shorts and get told to go home, like preaching with the communion service. So
yeah,
it's, when you think of it, it's just ridiculous. But
I often just lament that people have hope all the time. Like, I'd rather, I can imagine your forebears going, forget hope, we're just going to forge ahead anyway. A little bit like what Danny just said there with forging your own way as a rebel because it's in your DNA.
Well,
there just doesn't appear to be any hope on the horizon for a collective Adventism getting behind its history and living with its flaws and promoting its beautiful gospel music kind of creatives of the 70s. I just don't see it happening. It hasn't happened for 50 years or 40 years.
I think Adventism got unstuck during World War I and World War II. I wasn't there to witness it, but the ramifications are like great grandma Susie Gerner, like, you know, she had a picture theatre going
Yeah.
during World War I and a meat sausage factory. Like, I think what Adventists sometimes think of who they are historically is not true. It's actually much more embracing and actually,
Yeah.
you know, it wasn't
Oh,
exclusive.
yeah. The grassroots are quite fine and want to move ahead and be progressive, or they're quite okay with being conservative and stay in the thing. My annoyance is with the leadership not
Yeah.
just recognizing and spotlighting history. They rewrite history. Hey, I'll bring up Terry Atkins has written an interesting post that just mentions a few names that I think will help bring things into a bit more clarity. Christ is Life theme for the 1970 Youth Congress, Canberra, 1970. I was in attendance. Tom Mitchell wrote the music. Jeff Dean wrote the words. Tom Mitchell for Fidelis Records recorded this theme song on his record. Tom Mitchell at the Dendy Theatre organ, Brighton, had this record recorded onto a CD a few years ago. Oh, okay, that's interesting. There, Terry, maybe you could let us get a copy of that. Robert Parr wrote the foreword for the record, stating the mercurial Tom Mitchell. I believe he got that right. And Terry, you are correct. I thought Tom was never going to pass away. He would often come into my music shop that I had in Currumbong, and it was just full of beans, incredible energy. Okay, back to the story. Tell us
Okay, I
more.
reckon it's a good time for us to launch into the movie.
Yeah. Hey, just before we do that, just these last three little quick picks that I was just bringing up because they were just preceded by a moment. Just quickly tell us a little bit about these. I think there's 3 picks.
Oh, okay. So there was a record of the soundtrack made with the movie, and this is the record that was released. And I think this is Trafford Fisher's copy.
Right.
But he gave it to Bob Wolfgram. And yeah, that was all the artwork for that was done by Russell Gibbs, who was Bert Gibbs' brother, who I spoke about before.
Yeah.
Lots of crossover here. There's people there like Judd, what's his name? And it'll be on the record in the credits.
I'm not sure if I can zoom in. Oh, I can, but I can't control the zoom. Whoop. I don't know if you can read
Warren
some of
Judd.
those names. Oh, there's Lynette Martin's on there.
Yeah. Ivan Caldwell.
Caldwell, yes. Yeah, Ivan. Wow, there's a legend. His son's amazing too, and his son's wife. So people can zoom into that if they can. We can try and upload some of these pictures. And this is the front cover of that, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you can imagine.
I remember this album vividly as a kid.
This was for public consumption.
Yeah.
Quite edgy for the time. Exciting.
Yeah. And your dad was producer, so was he? So
no, Warren Judd was the producer for this actual record.
Right.
Dad was pushed to the margins with the movie and the record. He really didn't have anything to do with it at all.
Oh, okay. Why would that have been?
Well, I'm guessing they wanted to take out the airtime. I think the hierarchy administration was scared of him.
Right.
They were scared of the energy that he had unleashed.
Right. Isn't that
That's
sad?
what Dad told me.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. That's this kind of fear they have of unleashing the creative spirit.
Because the irony is that Adventism comes from this idea of present truth, which I was led to understand as an evolving idea of goodness and present truth. And yet when you ask for the Holy Spirit to like be released and to do something, and the Holy Spirit does, oh hell, let's pull it down.
I know.
And so Dad actually felt like the Holy Spirit was doing amazing stuff in this time.
Yeah.
But the whole thing was canned.
I know. Wow. I could write a book about my era from playing music in the Adventist church for decades, almost weekly. And I spoke to a youth leader that was quite supportive in the 90s, and he said to me, "You've got no idea how much I held them back from stopping you playing all the time." And I thought, how sad, like that, to he was almost kind of seeing that as a badge of honor, and I respected him and I valued that he did that. But why be a part of something that's constantly, you know, imagine the culture of the Beatles, Stones, Bob, Dylan. You know, I had to kind of, you got no idea how much they were trying to hold you back. The leadership that was trying to hold us back should have been allowing us to flourish.
Yeah. When I was Avondale in the early 90s, Dad came, visited me during a chapel service, like on a Friday night.
Right.
And he poked his head on the door. He said, "What's going on in there?" Because they were singing scripture and song,
yeah,
and Hillsong and stuff like that. And compared to his worldview and his experience of worship, it just didn't compare. Like,
interesting.
From the 50s and the 60s,
yeah,
like, it just didn't have the same energy. But
yeah. Here's on this release, we've got Ralph Carmichael, a traditional song, Bruce Judd, another traditional one. There's What a Friend We Have in Jesus, arranged by Bob Wolfgram, and Truth with Brian Patterson, who's a legend within this kind of music era as well. And I think we've got a picture of you coming up there. There we go. That's our promo pic. So yes, let's have a look at the movie. Well, I start a little bit of the
don't start with the beginning. That's I don't think that's just an introduction. I'd go straight to 7:33.
Let's see if I can do that. Okay, I think this is right. Let's experiment. I've not done this exact technical thing before, but let's see how we go. Okay, so that's on the screen. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Let's press play and see what happens.
Man must worship something. And so today we have different gods. Gods of possessions or knowledge through education. But in spite of it all, man still hasn't found meaning and happiness. And some of the best educated people in the world are without hope. But there's another son, the Son of God. And he's the author of all light and wisdom. 2,000 years ago, Jesus told his followers that if any man followed him, he wouldn't be walking in darkness. But he also showed us the secret of how to get out of this mess. It's no secret now, hidden in another generation. It's the good news for today, real and alive, and far too powerful to be hidden in the stones of the past. Those who think God is dead are wrong. It's just that without people, so many of his houses are lifeless places, uninhabited memorials to the past, just like halls of silence where once there was singing. But just as the sun remains in the sky, not bound by human time, so the Son of God, Jesus, shines in every generation, giving warmth and meaning to the lives of those who let the sun shine.
Are you growing weary in the struggle of it all? Jesus will help you when on his name you call. He's always there, walking by our side, he's all behind, all when you get discouraged, just remember what to do. Reach out to Jesus, he's reaching out to you. He's the life you're living, filled with sorrow and despair. Does the future press you with its worries Are you tired of running? Have you almost lost your way? Jesus is gonna help you. Just come to Him today. He's always there. He'll never fail. Faithful and true. Walking by our side in His love we hide. No one can prove. When you get discouraged, just remember what to do. Reach out to Jesus, He's reaching out to you.
Okay, pause there.
Reach out
Hang on a second.
to Jesus.
I'll just let that last note come in.
Reaching out to
That's a nice cut.
Nice.
Okay,
Oh,
so
look.
that's the Sydney version of the Glowworms, and that was a group called, just bringing it up here, Commission. It was
Now,
like a Sydney version of the Heritage Singers.
Yes, I see Ivan Caldwell in there,
Yep.
and that's Warren Judd, isn't it?
Next to Ivan, there's Jenny Parr. I'm guessing that's Bob Parr's daughter.
Right.
Jan Judd, Warren Judd, Lynn Martin, and Lindria Mayweld. Can
you just go left to right again? I just got that a bit confused. So we've got Ivan Caldwell on the left.
Yeah, this is the names that Bob Wolfgang gave me.
Yeah.
Is it Jenny Parr?
Jenny Parr in the yellow.
Maybe Warren
Judd there. Yeah.
Jan Judd.
Yeah.
Lynn Martin.
Yes.
And Lindria Mayweld.
Yes.
Now, just have a look there. And same for the Glowworms. None of the guys wearing ties. That's a bit edgy.
Yes.
At that time, if you remember the times.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah.
So it's a departure. So yeah, that's the first nice little clip. You want to go to the next one?
Yes. What's the next one?
I just keep on playing.
I might have all sorts of copyright claims, but I'm hoping we don't.
Well, it's a link off the internet, so
yeah,
you're okay.
They'll just silence us or not, but we'll keep it up there as long as we can. That's for sure. So I just press play, and I'll just we've got Bob Wolfram's written a message. Let's just we'll come to that in a minute. I'm glad you're watching, Bob, and I hope you and Lowell will join us for an interview very soon, sharing your memories of this time period. I would love that if you could. Here I am doing an invitation live. Someone has also said, is this on a record Sold on Him? No, this is Let the Sunshine, but Sold on Him was around that same time period too.
Just before you leave that, can
Yep.
I just say the emotional connection for me there as well?
Sure.
When I first dug this up, I'd heard about it and dug it up. I had to cry. I did cry hearing that song and seeing those pictures. It just, I don't know, it goes back to my Adventist DNA, and I would have been, 3 or 2 at this time growing up. But also a thing that I thought was worth saying was, just trying to think here on the spot. I dug up this, and you saw in the first frame there, Gordon Box. Okay?
Was that Gordon doing the talking?
Yeah.
Right.
So he introduces the film.
Yeah.
And Gordon is a close personal friend of mine. He's one of Dad's best friends.
Yeah.
And at the time when this movie was cut, he was the youth director for the Trans Australian Union Conference. And I was very excited about it. So I visited Gordon for the last 15 years of his life monthly.
Wow.
And he was in Coronella at the time when I dug this up, and I ran into Coronella. I said, Gordon, I found the movie. And he said to me, I don't want anything to do with it. You just the body language is like
Really?
just totally repelled it because
Why?
well, I'm guessing for Gordon, it was a huge disappointment. Like here,
What?
Gordon, here is Gordon as an administrator building a bridge to the young people,
Yeah.
and then it hardly even gets a hearing, and it's then parked in the cupboard for the next 30 years.
Yeah.
And then when it is released, it's just history. It's not current.
Yes. Look, I
So
know.
a lot of pain there for Gordon.
Yeah. Oh, look, and this is why I have no hope for the church. And if I did have hope for the church, it's not going to happen in my lifetime. And what's the point? It's supposed to be in your lifetime. It's supposed to be now. It's supposed to be good news. It's supposed to be passed on from like what Gordon was doing, what your dad was doing, what Bob Wolfgram was doing, all these guys. It's supposed to be a light passed on to the next generation and the next generation and the next generation, not suppressed for 30 years and key leaders booted out and over 200 pastors in Australia kicked out. It's just an absolute decimation, and they should be ashamed of themselves. Anyone involved with that.
It's like that little
just
song we used to sing,
ridiculous.
"This Little Light of Mine." You
Yeah.
know, I'm gonna let it shine.
Yeah, I know.
Exactly. And that's
It just makes me. I'm upset. I'm angry. I'm concerned. I'm frustrated that you dedicate. I gave Adventism the best creative years of my life, and thought the suppression was normal. I just thought that was normal.
I could hear your frustration there.
Incredible.
I've had the same.
And this is like what Gordon was saying. You know, here you go. You finally unearthed this thing that should have been released at the time, and the admin should have gotten behind it.
It was produced by the admin. Actually, this is division level.
Yeah, that's right.
Where this is made.
What turned into the media
then they pulled
center.
the pin on it.
It's just, oh my goodness. Bob Wolfgram, I'll bring it up. He has said, Kenton, I'd vote for you for GC president, my friend.
I thought that was Pratty. Thanks, Bob.
That's great, Bob. Good on you. Bob has done some incredible creative work within the Adventist Church and beyond.
All this information I'm sharing right now is actually from Bob because
good. Okay,
so
well,
let's keep on going.
I'll press play. Has that come back up on the screen?
Yeah.
Cool. Here we go.
What does a guy do when he reaches the top of his profession and finds that life has no meaning for him? You know, it was right here in Melbourne that real meaning came into my life, where I met Jesus Christ for the first time. I was a professional musician by trade, and all my friends introduced me to different vices, drugs being one, and told me that I'd find a high in life. But it let me down terribly. I didn't find that real high and real meaning until I found Jesus Christ for the very first time. You know, what is truth is a question that's been asked by many today. They sing about it and they talk about it. But Jesus Christ is the real truth. He is truth to me.
It's Brian Patterson, isn't it?
Yeah.
This song that I wrote about truth. To find what's truth, today my friend, can worry most, I guess. In a world so involved, complex and a mess. Freedom, our young ones cry, their faces filled with sorrow, hoping for that one day and a sunnier tomorrow. Truth is love and understanding. Truth is pure in every way. Truth is simple godliness, my friend, that tells this world it's lost its way. It's hard to know which way to turn in this old world today. For people, they can't seem to find that straight and narrow way. But if we seek to find, then we will surely see. A man once lived who paid the price to set all mankind free. every way. Truth is simple, godliness, my friend, that tells this world it's lost its way. You can find truth in drugs, my friend. I know I've tried it too. You fall away, you cease to care, and no one cares for you. You wish that you could go back home and start your life again, to live a full and simple life, to live to be a man. Truth is love and understanding. Truth is pure in every way. Truth is simple godliness, my friend, that tells this world it's lost its way. Truth is love and understanding. Truth is pure in every way. Truth is simple godliness, my friend, that tells this world it's lost its way. Lost its way. Lost its way.
The only reason that I'm living today, the only reason I'm happy today, is because I'm preparing to meet Jesus when he returns. Think about it. Why live a miserable life on this earth and die with no hope when you can live a happy, fulfilling life on this earth and then have eternal life afterwards?
The problem is that most people are pretty prejudiced to religion. They say, well, we can do without religion these days, or the church is too formal, you can't find God in a church. And there are other people who say, well, look, the church is right out of touch. It doesn't communicate to people in the world today. And I think that this has led many people, and especially the Jesus Revolution has underlined this fact, that young people are trying to find things that are real outside of the church. And this has led to a different form of witnessing, or a different concept in the form of witnessing, where the young people become a little impatient with the established ways, as honest and genuine as they are, in the need to find a new way to communicate with people where they are.
I found this an effective way of reaching out after people, of showing my love that I'd found in Jesus Christ.
And young people who have experienced a tremendous change in their way of life by accepting Jesus Christ and his way, have got something they feel is worthwhile to offer, the only solution they believe.
Christianity is my whole way of life. I mean, you're subject to so many different influences. You have kids from college or uni telling you to believe this and believe that, and you just wonder where you are. You seem to be floating around wondering who to believe and what is right and wrong. But Christianity gives you some direction.
And the hope is that Christ's coming again very soon. And this was what makes one happy and involved. And that's why the young kids are out there saying what they're saying. Anyone can come to Christ.
Many of the young people involved in the making of Let the Sun Shine are now leaders in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. It makes you wonder about the potential of Christian young people today. I mean, young people often have the energy, the time, and the independence to throw themselves into projects of various kinds. If they were given the right support, practical and spiritual, it would be exciting to see just how far they could go. Food for thought.
I'll just pause that there for a minute. Be exciting to see how far they could go. I would say would have been exciting to see how far they could have gone.
Yeah, you can imagine that film being released division-wide, if not worldwide.
Yeah.
And just
at the time. When did it come out?
1970, I think, or 71.
It's mind-blowing. So I didn't even know that. I vaguely became aware of the Sydney contingent. We by the time I was, hitting 79, 80, 81, we were more aware of the Bob Wolfgram, not so much aware of the Warren Judd era. That was the album that really captured our attention. We were literally the next generation ready to catch that flame, you know, the baton, and they were gone. And I just, watching that back made me very emotional.
Oh yeah, when the first time you see it, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Touch the
it's
strings.
just so, it's moving. And Brian Patterson has that he might be watching today. I hope he is. Brian has that passion still for the gospel to this day. It's never waned in him. And imagine if my generation had, and your generation, you know, so you're younger than me, imagine if my generation had been influenced and could continue to connect with these guys and interact with them, and then I passed it on to you, and it's just something I'm struggling to just
Well, the proof is in the pudding.
Fathom the loss.
No, if the proof is in the pudding, like if the Adventist Church just kept its young people, it would be 10 times the size that it is today. 10 times.
Yeah. And not only did they not successfully keep their young people, like when, and Dr. Lindsay's amazing. I ran into him the other day. Love him. He's an incredible person. But he mentioned there that lots of those young people went on to leadership. I don't think any of them did.
Oh, they did. Like, we saw there Brian Craig.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
But would he have been considered one of the young people at the time?
Well, he was a graduate of theology at Avondale. I think he's speaking there.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. You're right.
Yeah.
So yes, many did, but many didn't.
Yeah, true.
So not only did they not foster the young people, they kicked out the mentors. So go ahead.
Look, I'm just reminiscing there with some thoughts from Bob Wolfgram here.
Just a quick question: was that Debbie Caldwell doing the spoken word there in the middle of that last part of the clip?
Well, Bob would know, probably.
Yeah, if Bob's watching, he might be able to let us know, and Debbie might be watching as well. Sorry, go ahead.
The guy in the like colourful red paisley shirt is a guy called Paul Johnson. He was a hot evangelical that started up a shop in Paddington in Sydney with a partner. And it was also Stan and Yvonne Woodbury. The other guitarist playing there was Ray Bacchetta, and there's some footage there of Debbie Reed, who's Chopper Reed's sister. She was also in the Glowworms. With the scene here in Melbourne, it wasn't just East Paran, it was Preston, it was Greensborough, it was Glen Huntly. There were groups from the academy. It was citywide. It wasn't just one church. It was really took off and spread through the churches. There were people involved from Brighton like Adrian Jones, Hughesdale, Armadale, North Fitzroy, Pastor Best, who Harry remembers fondly from East Paran. Of course, there was Dad, Mark and Debbie. Now, I used to go to Hawthorne High School for Dad's chaplain services because he was also the chaplain there as well. I don't know how he did it all. And I can remember sitting there in the front seat as a 4-year-old. I asked Dad once what he thought of Mark Reed, and he said he was a cheeky little kid. I watched Chopper's movie, and that same bloke, you know, he went to North Fitzroy Church just like I did.
Wow.
He's a product of Adventism. We have to own it.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
There was a teacher there, the guy sort of with the long sideburns. He was a teacher at Hawthorne High. There were some other names like Christine. Did I say Brian Patterson? Christine Watson Brown, Harvey Litch. They were apparently a star couple. Gary went up north. Brian, that group that you saw there in Newcastle on the beach, that was Brian Patterson's group there in Newcastle. Bob also talked about, and Harry talked about, a group at Newcastle, which included Robert Wolfgram, Paul and Grant Woodward, Carl Durrant, Lowell Tarling, Harry and Julianne Cook. They used to also get down and witness in Sydney. And then you're just about ready for the group from Adelaide. And a little item now on the Murray River.
Awesome. And Dave Wilmoth is watching. Dave, were you in that clip as well? I saw a Les Paul Gibson in the clip. and I know that you used to have one. So, Dave, if you're watching, let me know if that was you in that clip as well. It may well have been. So we'll go on to the next clip. Do I just keep playing, or is there a number?
Yeah, just keep on playing. It only goes. We've done for most of the footage already, so we haven't
Yep.
got far to go. This is like the last closing item.
Now let me bring that up.
There's two items. There's one on the Murray River and there's one on the snow.
Right. I'll just keep playing until
finish the one on the Murray River there, and we'll just reflect, and then we'll go to the snow.
Okay, cool. So just tell me to pause in case I'm lost in the moment.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're continuing there with incredible Dr. Lindsay, who is a wonderful human being. Is this working?
Pacific Classics will be back with the second half of Let the Sun Shine after this short break.
And we're back. South Pacific Classics.
Welcome back
that were never given the chance to be a classic.
Enjoying the film footage that we've brought you over this series. In today's show, we're exploring the church youth movements of the 60s and 70s, which led to new ways of telling the old story. The film we've been seeing, Let the Sun Shine, is an interesting mix of spoken word and what we would now call music video. It was intended for viewing by young people with an interest in spirituality, but no firm commitment to a particular religion or denomination. If you've been watching this film with us, you'll have noticed that the spoken word sections are more like a friendly conversation than a formal sermon. The musical style is also interesting to note. From today's perspective, it's fairly gentle, melodic folk music. But in the 1970s, when this film was made, the use of guitars and percussion in religious music was a contentious issue within many congregations. In this film, you'll notice lingering shots of the guitar, amplifier, and tambourine. The filmmakers are sending a clear message here about where they stand in relation to the debate. So let's return now for the second half of Let the Sun Shine.
I have a friend who's never going to fail me. No matter how I may let him down, until the end, standing there beside me. Whatever I do, he'll always be around. That's where I like to go, where the clear stream waters follow on down to where the air is cool. And there to see, to let the mountains hide me, wash away my tears, give a little cool. Meet my Lord way down by the river, where peace and love shine down from the sky. I'm gonna meet my Lord way down by the river, let all my troubles roll on by. Roll on by, I'm gonna meet my Lord way down by the river, where peace and love shine down from the sky. I'm gonna meet my Lord way down by the river, let all my troubles roll on by. Once in a while, everyone gets lonely, and some of us try to make it on our own. But there's someone waiting like I told you, and he is the one that's gonna carry you home. to meet your Lord way down by the river, where peace and love shine down from the sky. I'm going to meet my Lord way down by the river. Let all my troubles roll on by. Roll on by, I'm going to meet my Lord way down by the river, where peace and love shine down from the sky. I'm going to meet my Lord way down by the river. Let all my troubles roll on by.
I've been studying with
I'll just pause that for a second so we can just talk a little bit about it. And if you could tell us who those 4 people were.
Well, as
I guess, sorry to interrupt, but I guess it's kind of so what the movie was trying to show was that we've got this kind of incredible revolution happening in Melbourne, in Sydney, Adelaide,
Newcastle.
and Newcastle.
And if you talk to somebody like Graham Fromfeld, it got to New Zealand as well.
Yeah. And you're related to Graham as well.
He's a cousin of mine.
He's your cousin, and Graham Frauenfelder has been an iconic figure in this area and part of the world for decades, and he, like me, kind of grasped little hints and glimpses of what was going on, and did our best to kind of shine a bit of a light in this part of the world.
Yeah. So the lady there with the blonde hair, from memory, Bob said that she was part of the Polish group with the survivors and the Black Diamonds.
Yes, the survivors, yes, with Adam Pinkowski, is that right?
Probably. I've got their record in the cupboard.
Yeah.
I remember the Black Diamonds in the late 70s. And the Black Diamonds in the late 70s, by that stage, they were wearing long fluoro skirts down to the ankles, not the short ones.
Yeah.
There was,
so sorry, what were the names again?
Well, correct me if Bob can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there was maybe Lynn Martin, Dave Hall, Alwyn Backhouse, and Kevin Weir. I might be wrong there, but I think that group features again. Now, in the next take, there's a bit of a testimony by Archie Steele about the coffee shop in Sydney that was like Melbourne.
Wow,
so let's give that a shot.
Okay, we'll give that a shot. Before we do, we'll just bring up Bob Wolfgram has made another comment. Great work IDing everyone in the clips, chaps, and thanks to Bob for helping with that. Some precious people there, doers and enablers. Paddo, wow, says Brian Patterson. I was scared of him at the time. I was a trier, but he was already there. He'd been in a band called The Executives. Phew, he says. And that's true. I remember meeting Brian. He went back to college at some point in the maybe 81, 79. I don't know. If Brian's watching, let us know. He wouldn't remember this, but I went down to his place. He was living in Nappy Valley there for a bit while he was studying. And I remember him playing some guitar in front of me, and I was like, whoa, that is just, I wish I could do that.
Yeah.
And we, all us young fellas, knew that he'd come from, a famous group and whatnot. Someone's just said, Kenton, what were your years at Avondale?
I look older than I am. I'm 1993. So I'm Dad's son. So I was a toddler when this stuff was done.
What's happening? Yeah.
Yeah.
Bob has added, makes me emotional. Great music around at that time. Kenton made the good and the right point that the talent and energy explosion of the period 65 to 1980 that I saw and participated in Adventism had many fronts, focal points, outlets, and wasn't just confined to one church or Bible study or a state or city. Yeah, that's true. But possibly ground zero was at East Pran. Do you think? Oh no, because it was starting. So the street preaching, you say, was 67, 68.
the glowworms, Dad didn't go to East Peran until 69, but
Right.
the glowworms was while he was assistant youth director.
Yeah.
And he moved out of that role to become pastor of East Peran. But yeah.
Like I love that it was spread everywhere, but I'm always interested in how did it come into Australia? Like we can find where it came into America and California and whatnot. But I wonder what the seed was in Adventism in Australia. Maybe Bob will know. What would be ground zero?
It was Dad. Everybody like Bob and Harry says it was Dad.
Yeah.
It was Dad's idea.
He was the spark that then ignited this thing that kind of exploded everywhere. And Bob's saying from 1965 to 1980.
But Dad wasn't the sort of person to hog a show, you know, like he would make friends of his enemies.
Yeah.
He had this like oozing charisma and the twinkle of his eye, just like his grandfather Robert. He would just win people over, even if they disagreed with him.
Yeah.
You know, that's the sort of person he was. And a cheeky smile. He knew how to win people over and get people on side.
Is there any footage of him most of the time? Is there any footage of him like that there's him doing a sermon or a talk or something we can kind of feel for his presence?
I have a box of cassettes, and there were loads of them because my dad used to actually record all his sermons.
Right.
But my brother Jim used to play them back to us in the middle of the night.
Play them back to you?
That's just a bit of family history. As I said, Elwyn Scale actually did take home movie, but Elwyn Scale did a whole lot of things. Like Elwyn Scale went around Australia at least once or more. He did a lot of work with youth at Delhunty Park, and all that footage hasn't been unearthed. It's in a box somewhere because I actually went and visited Elwyn at Moe. I said,
"Is Elwyn still alive?"
No, he died of cancer about 2 or 3 years ago.
Oh, so has he got family that might be able to unearth it?
There's Helen, and like I said, Helen and his children, are still running this Delhunty idea north of Newcastle. So it's in a box somewhere, and at the right time it will come up.
And not far from me, potentially.
Not far from you.
Can you off air give me some contacts, and I'll see if I can track it down and find the box.
That'd be awesome, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. We're unearthing a piece of history here that we're going to lay out on the table, and we're going to pick up where we left off. Okay, so back to the movie.
Back to the movie.
And we will press the right buttons. Here we go.
That I call Wally. And to see him change from being a person that just sort of thought about God to someone who really knows God, it just makes you feel really good inside, because Christ wants us to win others to him. He wants us to tell others so that they can be happy like we are.
Dave, how successful do you think our coffee shop has been here?
Well, Archie, perhaps before we were to talk about success, we should look at the aims of our coffee shop. Our aims here were to provide a stepping stone for young rebels straight off the street into our coffee shop and prepare them by face-to-face personal intensive witnessing for moving into the traditional church. Obviously, you can't take someone straight off the street into the church, and we want to provide a place where people could talk sensibly, unemotionally about Jesus and what value he has for us in this age.
Because once you know him and really know Christ as your personal Saviour, you have to tell others, because it's so great. You're so happy that you want to share it. It doesn't matter.
I recognise her.
In what facet of
press pause.
just as long as you share.
Yeah. Doesn't she have an infectious smile?
Yeah, I recognise her. Who is that? There's a few faces I'm recognising, but just don't know names.
Yeah. So, and that, like, what I find remarkable is that I'm 20 years down the track from when this was made. And, you know, we're here at college there with Barry Oliver. He's teaching us how to contextualise the gospel and reach out to the community and do earthy stuff and put it in the language and the culture of wherever you are. But what I find remarkable is that Barry went to college with Harry Ballas, But Barry never ever like footnoted or remembered that this has already happened. Like we
I
already have
know.
an example of how we
Yes.
could do this in Australia.
Yeah. This
That's
is
what
what I often talk about, this looping within Adventism. And as it loops around again, the next generation is not told of what has already been done.
And there's John Ballas. I remember John taking a
Yeah, John's
a
made
song
a
service
comment.
for there at Buffs at North Fitzroy.
Who's written? That's Bob. Bob's
Yes.
written. My dear friend John Ballas, Harry's younger brother, will be able to identify the people in Survivors and Black Diamonds for us. He was involved with them and songwriting for them, for what I recall. So, how do we get in touch with John?
Harry.
Harry. Okay, I'll write to Harry and find out where
Yeah.
John is. Yeah. Okay. Well, I keep playing a bit more here.
Yeah, keep playing.
Tell others about him and let the Son of God shine.
I remember this one. Let it shine. This little light of mine.
The light that shines is the light of love. It outshines darkness from above. It shines for me and it shines for you. It shows what the power of love can do. Shine my light both bright and clear. Shine my light both far and near. Where there's a dark corner in this land, I'm gonna let my little light shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. The light that shines is the light
There's your
of
credits.
Yes.
It shines for me and it
We
shines for
should
you.
pause them as we go. Fantastic stuff. No corner in this land, let my little light shine.
Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine,
Oh, brilliant.
That's actually a good place.
Yeah. Now, so Russell Gibbs, is he still going around the traps? I'd love to interview him about this.
Yes, it's worth anybody like that.
And I think Warren Judd did the arrangement of that. And that was one of the first kind of folky pop songs that I learned as a young boy, like well before I was aware. Like we learned it in Sabbath school, probably. I must have been about 8 or 9 or something. I don't know. Who knows? But a great song. What a great little movie. Why on earth was it suppressed? And was it suppressed way back in the early 70s?
About 71, 72. Now,
did your dad ever talk about that?
The suppression?
Yeah.
Yeah, he said the church could have been much more than what it was if it just harnessed the energy that it had been unleashed.
Yep, that's it. You've nailed it.
But it's just a good spot, I suppose, to talk about the legacy, because we're now 50 years down the track of what happened. And we've talked of the ripple effect that it continues. It hasn't been stopped, like the Delhunty Park Ministry.
Yeah.
Continues.
Hasn't been stopped, but it's been fragmented.
So I would like to talk a little bit about the legacy.
Yes.
And you saw in that last clip there that it was on snow at Smiggins Holes. And Russell actually shared with me that he took the shots on a toboggan, sliding down the snow with the camera.
Yeah.
So, yeah, exciting stuff. And I have to admit that I'm actually addicted to snow.
Oh, really?
It's my drug of choice. I've been
You
the,
better be careful saying snow and drug of choice.
I've been the president of the Victorian Cross Country Ski Club for 6
Really?
years.
Right.
I'm totally hooked. I go there for a month every year. And I like to talk about legacy. So many of the kids who were involved were in a time of teenage rebellion, as they spoke. Long hair, jeans, the hippie movement, the use of drugs were all the hallmarks of the time. And I've spoken to many of these people, to be frank, Peter, who now look like you.
Yeah.
Like they're just ready for retirement.
Yeah, silver haired.
Yeah, and I'm in that now, and I'm 20 years down the track. So they're forever grateful of being given hope.
Yeah.
And they're all forever grateful of having their lives lifted from the gutter, as Harry spoke about with Carpenter. All the memories are positive over 50 years later.
Yep.
And that's why I'm sharing this with you. So Dad from this point went on to become an organisational psychologist. He wrote Fresh Start, a stop smoking program for the Victorian Anti-Cancer Council, which went statewide. I visited with him radio stations and TV stations and hospitals with that rollout. And he worked for large companies like Telstra, Mercedes-Benz and Kodak. And he also lectured at RMIT, which became a leg of Melbourne University. So I've listened to your podcast, Little Peter, and there continues to be a divide between the conservatives and the progressives. A bit like for me in Matthew there, where there's the sheep and the goats and the wheat and the tares. And I used to bring this up with Dad, and I'd say, who's right, Dad? And Dad would say to me, we don't know who's right. That's for God to decide. And but one thing that Dad repeated again and again and again, every time I had an argument with my nominating committee or with my church committee or with the whatever committee it was, he was said, remember, Kenton, remember, you will know that they are my followers. This is the words of Jesus, by their love for one another.
Yeah.
It's not who's right and who's wrong, who can shut down who. It's what's your love like? Do you actually embrace the person you disagree with? Do you get along with them in the good and the bad times? And the other things that I got from Dad was that it's more important than do right than be right. And that for me is the difference between being political, that's being right, and doing right, which is being ethical. You know, there's a divide there. Actions speak louder than words, and values are caught, not taught, as Ray Rowanthorpe would tell us. And I actually think pioneer Adventists were creators. We spoke about them. They set up Sanitarium Health Food Company. They set up the Australasian Union Conference Association, the Echo and Science Publishing House, Avondale College, Sydney Adventist Hospital, Auckland Adventist Hospital, Warburton Healthcare Centre, many health retreats, schools, all sorts of outreaches. And they were all made possible because people back then, they sacrificed. It was done by volunteers. It wasn't done by administrators. You get in the buy, but that's what the church has, this rich cultural heritage that we've been talking about. And as my Uncle Bruce Johansen says now, and he has memories going back into the 30s in Warburton, back in the 1930s, Adventists knew what it was to agree to disagree. They would argue about, that person from the north or from the south, whatever prophecies it was. They would argue till they were sick and like blue in the face. But when it got to church, they were mates. They washed each other's feet.
Yeah.
They washed each other's feet.
Yep.
They cared for each other, even though they were polar apart. And I think Adventism largely has lost that. And then no reason why they can't embrace it. Like, it's there for free. And so I would just like to finish on this note, unless you have any more questions, that Dad had that love of the outdoors with NABWA. And the two greatest values that have stayed with me from my Adventist DNAs are the ideas of hope and rest. Hope in a new world, a world made new and healthy, and rest that we get from that idea of Sabbath and pulling back. I mean, you can take those ideas anywhere. That doesn't have to stay within Adventists, and it's out there for everyone. It's not under a monopoly. And the ideas of balance and peace in nature have stayed very close to me. And I still, like I said, Pete, I still have hope for Adventism. And I'll put it this way. Never have these values been more important to global health and well-being. Like, health and well-being is the latest tagline, isn't it? And vegetarianism now, that's actually an answer to our problem with greenhouse gases, particularly methane from animal agriculture. Methane has a shelf life of only 10 years, whereas carbon dioxide lasts for thousands of years. If we could just pull down our methane levels, we wouldn't be confronted with the catastrophe of climate change. And it could happen in 10 years. We only have 7 till 2030, which is the next tipping point we have to navigate. And within 7 years, I don't know if you're aware of this, but the permafrost around the Arctic Circle is going to melt. And when that melts, it's going to release more greenhouse gases than already admitted throughout entire human history several times. So it comes back to this thing: are we going to do right or be right? Have I got on my soapbox enough?
No.
I just feel
I love it. It's been a great conversation.
It's still relevant. Still relevant to me.
Yeah. Isn't that funny? Like watching that movie, it's relevant like today.
It hasn't changed, has it?
Yeah, it's amazing.
If Adventists just did what was on that movie now, they would be picking cherries.
Yeah. It's interesting, since 1980 and Glacier View, that I didn't see that joy and look in young people's eyes until the early 90s. So there's a good 10 years where there was just shell-shocked Adventist young people.
Yeah.
But I'm amazed at the joy. They were genuine when they were speaking there. There was no propaganda. There was no script like most Adventist presentations today.
Yeah.
It was from the heart, and that's why it's still relevant today. Yeah,
it is. Yeah, and it's like the message. If people just took on board what Jesus had to say, it's timeless.
Yeah.
And and I asked Uncle Bruce, I'm going to be candid again. I said, Uncle Bruce, what happened to us? And he says to me, Kenton, we realized that Jesus was bigger than the church.
Wow.
And we found him on the outside.
Wow. When did he say that?
Oh, about 2 years ago.
Far out.
He's 96.
Incredible.
Yeah, he remembers the original Science Publishing House.
Would he do an interview with me?
Oh, yeah.
Can you ask him for me?
I'll try. You'll have to tee up his kids with some technology.
Technology, that'll be all right. I'd love to do that.
Probably could do it off his iPhone.
Yeah.
But he's good at telling stories.
Yeah. If you don't mind, ask him. It'd be great. And Bob, if you're still watching, can I interview you and Lowell next week, next Thursday, 11:30? Let's see if that happens. Hey, I'm going to bring up, Bob's just written a post. By the way, everyone, I'm talking to Kenton Johansen, and we've been having the most amazing conversation. We were thinking about dividing this into 2 weeks, but I'm glad we've kind of put it all in one space here. Thanks so much. Honestly, this has been, I'm feeling vibrant and uplifted by all of this.
Good.
Earlier, I'm saying, I'm frustrated. I'm annoyed. I think those leaders are culpable for axing this incredible creativity, just chopping its head off. But I can balance those two things. I've got that on the one side, but my overall arching feeling is excitement and inspiration, and I'm excited about this era and giving it another burst of life as much as possible.
Yeah.
I've put the link to the Sonshine video in the description below on YouTube, and I'll put it into the comments here as well. It might already be in the comments. Bob Wolfgram has written this, and I'll have to read the rest of it off the line there. Jim Joey, as we called Kenton's dad, was one of the gospel focal points, absolutely critical to reinforcing our sense of community in those times. It was not just ideology, it was music too, because Jim was a jazz man. He knew music and the combined impact it could have on us when coupled with inspiring beliefs. He kept our interest in Adventism until Adventism said it was no longer interested in him or us. Well, that's a good little line. He kept our interest in Adventism until Adventism said it was no longer interested in him or us.
Can I share a little bit of music there?
Yeah.
So he's one of the few Adventist ministers to play jazz piano.
Right.
Without music. So he loved jazz. And his favourite musician was probably Mahalia Jackson. And most people these days probably wouldn't know who Mahalia was. But in a time, Mahalia was as big as any jazz musician. And she was actually the queen of gospel. Like, she was the first person to take gospel to the hit parade. And she did make the hit parade, like the top 10 in her time. And this is a very interesting story. So Mahalia Jackson and Martin Luther King Jr. were best of friends. Like, if you ever watched the movie of Martin Luther King Jr., she features.
Yes.
And in his movie and her own movie. And she crisscrossed America during the 60s over the civil rights campaign for liberating African Americans. And she'd been to all the campaigns with Martin Luther King, and she did the music for them. And when they did that big parade in Washington, D.C., that we have has been cemented in our brains when Martin Luther King gave us that amazing speech, she was there. And what she did is she whipped up the crowd beforehand. She did the preliminaries. She got the crowd not only singing but dancing, like a couple of 100,000 of them. And then when Martin gets up to deliver his speech, I Have a Dream, that wasn't scripted.
Wow.
If you look at Martin's notes, I Have a Dream wasn't there.
Wow.
The reason I Have a Dream about a new world and fairness and a world that we'd be proud of, the way that happened was Mahalia was on the rostrum behind him, and she's saying to Martin, tell them about the dream. Tell them about the dream. Obviously, in motel rooms, they had talked about the dream. They talked about the dream because their lives had been under threat. And we know Martin lost his life over this stuff. And then Martin goes into his immortal words, I have a dream, but the person that triggered that memory, those dreams, that was Mahalia and her music.
And that was your dad's favourite.
Yeah,
artist.
And that sort of, those connections, and they give you pins and needles, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I love Mahalia's music even now.
Goosebumps.
Like, you got to get in the groove for it.
Oh, she's powerful.
She's awesome. That's what Dad used to play in the car. So we were poor, minister's family. Dad had a green Valiant station wagon, and there was no tape deck in the car. He used to just play a little tape deck that was powered by batteries on the front seat, and it was Mahalia all the time. Mahalia. And yeah, they were the wind. She was the wind beneath his wings.
Boy,
like she made him like what he was. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's a powerful story. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it makes me realize that this inspiration and the power of it, and this bright, shiny light that we've been talking about, is nothing to do with Adventism or any religion or any person. It's about this light shining through people. And I'd love to see this particular brand of that, this 65 to 1980, as Bob pointed out, of incredible creativity and gospel-focused enthusiasm and message. I'd love that to be shining on still for current and future generations, inside or outside of Adventism, because it can't be harnessed, you know. And I think your dad grasped that idea that this is just incredible. Let's just let it. Oops, I just knocked over half my table here. It's just he noticed this energy. You just can't stop it. It's just going to burst out there.
Well, it's like that song, "Let Your Light Shine," "Little Light Shine." Once you pass on that light to somebody else with a candle, as you would have, say, at the Maya Music Bowl with Carols by Candlelight.
Yeah.
Once you when I think that's passed on, it's like it's unleashed.
Yes, I like that. It's unleashed.
it's like it's gone viral, you know.
Yeah. And I guess what I'm saying is that this kind of gospel that was unique to Adventism, like it had the Adventist little quirks to it, but it was meaningful, and I think deserves to continue to see the light of day.
I hope so.
Yeah. Mate, it's been so good chatting with you today. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you, Peter.
Our 3 hours and 11 minutes feels like 30 minutes.
Almost a marathon.
You're getting up there with the longer interviews I've had. So everyone, thank you so much for watching. Put some love hearts up there in Facebook. Please, if you can, click that subscribe button if you're watching YouTube. And if you're watching Facebook, just lean up, 2 centimeters and click the like button. The algorithms greatly, I benefit from the algorithms, not me personally or financially, but it spreads the information out there to a wider audience, and we want people to see this. I've got a little free song there. If you go to peterdixon.gumroad.com, you're welcome to download that. And if anyone wants to support what I'm doing, PayPal, Peter Dixon Music. And just a quick plug, Voice Life Fellowship, which is a very positive, gospel-focused gathering fellowship. We're running our first live gathering January 21 in Toronto, if you'd like information about that. Gospel-focused, 4 gospels, music, good, all the good stuff, all the good news. There's no dissident behavior or comments. I will be speaking only positively. We've got special guest speakers, music, soup and buns, 11:30 meeting and a 2 o'clock meeting. So I'll let you know more about that. Sorry for all those announcements there, Kenton.
Just a couple of credits.
Yes,
I'd like to thank my sister Morel for helping me with these memories. Harry Ballas, Robert Wolfgram, Milton Hook, Lynn Lister, Ross Goldstone, Ron Thomas, and Bob Parr.
Brilliant.
I got a lot of these memories, not just, obviously I wasn't there, so I had to research there.
Yeah.
They brought those memories back.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Kenton, for being part of our conversation today, SDA&A. And I think you were mentioning Gordon Box earlier. I think we could have I've wanted to learn more about him. Could I interview you one day and we can just discuss Gordon Box?
Well, his daughter's still alive in Sydney.
Yeah.
She's a force for good. I'd get onto her.
Her as well. Boy, I've got to. Yeah. Can you remember all these names I've got to write down and remember? Okay, well, we'll say farewell for now. See you later, Kenton. Thank you everyone. Until next time.